My happy marriage didn't last long. We had been married for 2 years, and I truly loved my husband. I spent every day trying to make him happy. I even made sure to take care of myself so he would always find me attractive. But then, I discovered he was cheating on me. John was the love of my life, but now he wanted a divorce. One afternoon, I thought he was at work, but he came home unexpectedly, with his lover. He was holding divorce papers in his hand. Since after the trip we went on last year, he started to explain. His lover sat silently, showing no emotion. When he said trip, I realized he was talking about our honeymoon. We had gone on a last-minute honeymoon when I got a work bonus. John wanted the trip, so I paid for it. It turns out, during our honeymoon, his ex-girlfriend, who was now his lover, reached out to him. That's when he decided he still had feelings for her. What are you talking about? That was our honeymoon, I said, shocked. There's no point talking about it now. I love her, and she loves me too, he replied coldly. I like you, but she's the one I truly love. You've got to understand. Understand? How could I? Did my feelings mean nothing to him? Then he sighed, as if he was tired of dealing with me. You'll find someone better, he said. You probably don't want to stay in this house anyway. We'll be living here, so pack your things and leave in about a week. It was like he was throwing me away, like I didn't matter anymore. John was the one who had asked me out. He was the one who proposed. Now, he was the one ending it all, without taking responsibility for anything. In that moment, all my love for him vanished. Without arguing, I signed the divorce papers. John and his lover left the house without a single apology. We'll come back next week, so be gone by then, he said casually as they left. I felt numb, like my heart had frozen. It all happened so fast that I didn't even cry. The next day, I asked a friend to help me pack my things and moved back to my parents' house. I worked as a nurse and had been the one paying most of our bills since John didn't make much at his job. While I was heartbroken by his betrayal and the divorce, at least I didn't have to pay rent anymore. That was a small relief. Soon after, I found a new place to live and started packing again to leave my parents' home. But then, something unexpected happened. Kathy, John is here, my mom said. It was raining outside, so I let him in. My mom looked at me apologetically, as if she didn't know what else to do. Why was my ex-husband here now? After everything, what could he possibly want? He didn't love me, so he couldn't be here to ask for another chance. Did he want money? That would be just like him. He always hated working and spent recklessly. I went downstairs to find out what he wanted. What do you want? My dad asked angrily. John was calm. I'd like to talk to your daughter, he said. He acted as though nothing had happened. I opened the door and faced him, ready to get this over with. But then he said something so shocking that I didn't know how to respond. John's new wife, who used to be his lover, sits beside him like she belongs here. Why is she even here? This is my parents' house. What kind of person brings their mistress-turned-wife to their ex's family home? It's insulting, disrespectful, and downright crazy. Calm down, John says, as if I'm the one acting unreasonable. His attitude disgusts me, and she just sits there silently, as if this is normal. I don't have time for this, I say. Whatever you're here for, hurry up and get it over with. John gives me a sharp look, clearly annoyed by my tone. This is important. We haven't settled the division of property yet. I'm here to collect my share, he says. Of course, money, I should have known. John looks almost eager now. He really thinks he's about to get something big. Well, you're right, I say, keeping my face calm. I've been expecting this moment, so I'm ready. I grab my purse and hand him 30 cents. Here you go, this is your share. What? John and his wife stare at the coins in my hand, confused. What is this? He snaps, throwing the coins onto the floor. His wife finally speaks, her voice sharp. Are you joking? You call this property? Stop messing around. They're both furious, their faces bright red. This is all that's left of our savings, I say calmly. John's face twists in disbelief. He clearly expected more. There's no way. You had $200,000. Give me my 100,000 now, he yells, flailing his hands like a spoiled child. His wife nods along, glaring at me. I stare at him, completely stunned. Was this the man I married? Hurry up and give me the money, he shouts, his voice growing louder. Then he starts throwing things. knocking over furniture, completely losing control. I stand there, frozen, watching him unravel. This man, the one I once loved, has disappeared. No, this must be who he really is. His true colors are finally showing. I'm so glad I left him. Hearing all the shouting and crashing sounds, my dad, who had stepped out, and my brother, who just got home, came into the living room. Dad froze for a moment, stunned by the sight of John throwing a tantrum, but quickly stepped in. He grabbed John's arms and twisted them behind his back to stop him from wrecking the room further. I explained the situation to my brother, who's a lawyer. Since he already knew about the divorce, he understood immediately. John's new wife overheard us talking and realized my brother was a lawyer. Her eyes widened in shock. "Wait, you never told me your ex-wife has a lawyer in her family," she yelled at John, clearly panicking. I couldn't help but wonder, why are they so desperate for money? I didn't even want to talk to John, but I decided to ask, why do you need the money so badly? You divorced me because you said this woman was the love of your life. You chose her over me and wanted me gone. Yes, that's right, John admitted, completely unfazed. But dividing the property is important. That house we're living in now was the one we lived in together, so we want to build a new house of our own. We also need a car because we plan to have kids. And I want to take my family on a nice vacation too. You know, the kind of things any good husband would do. That's why I'm here, even though it's hard for me. Every single thing he said was selfish. He didn't want to come here? Well, I didn't want him here either. And the worst part? He didn't even realize how horrible his actions had been, and he wasn't the least bit sorry. Also, he added, I financially supported our marriage. The least you could do is give me my share as a thank you to your dear ex-husband. I froze, completely stunned. What did he just say? That he financially supported me? He must be joking. John never cared about work. He'd leave work as early as possible just to play video games at home. If he didn't feel like working, he'd take the day off, often faking sickness once he ran out of paid leave. He had no ambition to earn more money. He relied on me entirely because I was a nurse and earned a good salary. Sure, once in a while, he'd toss me $100, but it wasn't enough to cover anything serious. Honestly, living with him was like living with a lazy, unemployed boyfriend who just crashed at my place. He didn't do any housework and never once thanked me for supporting him. And now, he had the audacity to claim he financially supported me? I couldn't believe it. I was beyond disappointed. You have no idea what you're talking about, I said coldly. If that's true, maybe you should give me back the 30 cents I just handed you. What are you even saying? He snapped, getting defensive. I turned to his wife, keeping my voice calm. And you thought you hit the jackpot when you heard about my savings, didn't you? Well, I have bad news for you. I stayed composed as they both glared at me, clearly fuming. At this point, my brother speaks up for me. Excuse me, he begins firmly. I'm Henry Thompson, and I'm a lawyer. I'll explain this clearly on my sister's behalf. Only the savings made during the marriage can be divided as property. Any money saved before the marriage belongs solely to the person who saved it. He looks directly at John and continues, my sister saved the $200,000 before your marriage. That makes it her personal property, and it's not subject to division. You, on the other hand, had only 60 cents left in your shared account. Your share is half of that, 30 cents. That's all you're entitled to, so there's no point in complaining. Henry's voice is calm, but leaves no room for argument. It seems my sister worked hard to save for your future, but I believe you spent everything on the woman sitting next to you. John and his wife are stunned into silence. But, John starts to argue, but Henry cuts him off. What I just said, I said as Catherine's brother. Now, allow me to speak as her attorney, he says. His tone sharpens. My client has requested compensation from you. Why haven't you paid it yet? It's true, I had asked for compensation after the divorce, but John had only paid part of it. I had been wondering why he hadn't paid the rest, so I officially asked Henry to step in. Although Henry is helping now, my actual lawyer is one of his colleagues. None of us expected John to show up today, so Henry is stepping in temporarily. With his calm but intense gaze, Henry stares down John and his wife. They fall silent. You were the one who had an affair and caused the divorce, Henry continues. It makes no sense for you to ask for any money. In fact, it seems you spent all the money my sister had saved for your new life. My sister's request is simple: return the total amount you owe her and pay the compensation you agreed to. That's impossible. John shouts. Honey, stop it. We can't push this any further, his wife whispers, trying to calm him down. John, however, stands up in anger and kicks the table. His wife grabs his arm, trying to hold him back. Henry stays calm, unfazed, and simply says the word, court. At that, John's anger deflates. He slumps down and starts explaining the truth. After our divorce, John lost his job. Since his new wife is unemployed too, they began borrowing money. Now, they're drowning in debt and can't pay the compensation they owe me. Desperate for money, they remembered my savings. They thought if they demanded a division of property, I'd hand over half of it. I sit there in shock, unable to speak, as John and his wife suddenly change their attitude. They start begging me for help. Next to me, Henry shakes his head, silently telling me not to listen to them. I feel no sympathy for John or his wife. I tell them they still have to pay back both the compensation and my savings. Then, I ask my brother and dad to escort them out. The past few hours have felt like a whirlwind. Once they're gone, my mom comes back into the room, sighing with relief, and starts tidying up. My dad, still furious, mutters about what a terrible man John is, while helping her. My brother rubs my back gently. You did nothing wrong, he says. What you did today, and even the divorce, you should feel proud of yourself. He reassures me, adding that we'll make sure John pays the compensation. He calls his colleague right away. Everyone at the law firm is behind you, he says with a warm smile. I slump into the couch and mumble, I'm so tired, Mom. You handled it so well, she says, hugging me tightly. How about we all go out for steak tonight to celebrate and relax? Her words bring comfort, and I melt into her arms. My dad and brother agree, and we have a wonderful family dinner that night. Later, with the help of my brother, his colleague, and their law firm, the compensation and my savings are finally returned to me. As for John and his wife, I hear they've been struggling. They haven't had any luck finding proper jobs and are now working multiple part-time shifts to make ends meet. It doesn't look like they'll be buying a house, a car, or going on vacations anytime soon. I've also noticed a change in their attitude. Whenever I see them on the street, they greet me politely. It's a small improvement, but seeing it gives me a sense of peace. As for me, life has changed for the better. I'm now in a steady relationship with the attorney who worked on my case. My brother, Henry, is thrilled about it. He says, this guy is perfect for you, and I think he's right. A year after the divorce, I'm planning to introduce my new boyfriend to my parents. I know they'll be happy for me. Looking back, when John called his lover the love of his life, I didn't understand what he meant. But now, I think I finally understand. My new boyfriend might truly be the love of my life.
I never thought I'd see my father cry. Not like this. Not with rage contorting his face, as he waved the bank statement in the air, his hands shaking. The statement that showed their retirement account, nearly $2 million, had been drained 3 days ago. How could you do this to us, Amanda? His voice cracked. Your own parents. We were gathered in the living room of my childhood home, the same room where Mom had taught me piano, where Dad had helped me with math homework, where family photos still lined the walls in neat chronological order. Now it felt like a courtroom, and I was on trial. My brother James stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, jaw set in that self-righteous way I'd seen too often lately. My sister Catherine paced behind Dad's armchair, occasionally pausing to shoot venomous glares my way. Even my youngest brother Michael, usually the peacemaker, sat in stony silence. Well, Catherine demanded, nothing to say for yourself? I looked around at their faces, faces I'd known all my life, faces now twisted with accusation and betrayal. 3 months ago, we'd all sat in this same room celebrating Dad's retirement. Now they thought I'd stolen everything he'd worked for. Actually, I said quietly, reaching for my phone, I have something you all need to hear. More lies, James scoffed. The bank records are clear, Amanda. The transfer came from your IP address, using your old login credentials. Dad trusted you with emergency access, and this is how you repay him. I held up my hand. Just listen. I pressed play, and suddenly different voices filled the room. Their voices recorded 2 weeks ago in this very house when they thought I was out of town. It's perfect. Catherine's voice crackled through the speaker. Amanda's credentials are still in the system. Once the money's gone, all evidence will point to her. But why Amanda? Michael's voice, uncertain. She's always been the responsible one. Exactly. James cut in. That's why no one will question it when the truth comes out about her gambling addiction. I still don't like it. Michael again. Framing our own sister. Look, Catherine's voice hardened. Dad's pension isn't enough. The medical bills are piling up. This is the only way to access the money before it's all gone to Mom's treatments. Amanda will take the fall. We'll find most of the money in an offshore account, play the heroes, and Dad will never know we were behind it. The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's hands had stopped shaking. Now they were completely still. The bank statement crumpled in his grip. Catherine had frozen mid-pace, her designer heels rooted to the carpet. James's face had drained of all color. There's more, I said into the silence. Would you like to hear the part where you discussed faking documents about my supposed gambling debts? Or the call with your friend at the bank who helped you trace the IP address to my home office? You recorded us? Catherine's voice was barely a whisper. No, I replied. Your own security system did. The one you insisted on installing last month. It has excellent audio capability and an interesting cloud backup feature. I turned to Dad, feeling the weight of his gaze. I discovered their plan last week. That's why I've been tracking all account activity. When I saw the transfer this morning, I knew they'd finally done it. But the money is still gone, Dad said slowly. I pulled an envelope from my bag. No, it's not. The moment I saw the transfer, I called the fraud department. They froze the account. I handed him a document. This is the paperwork showing the funds being returned. It should be back in your account by morning. Michael had started to cry silently. James was gripping the mantel so hard I thought his fingers might break. And Catherine looked like her entire world was collapsing. Why? Dad's voice was hollow. My own children. Mom's experimental treatment costs more than insurance will cover, I said quietly. They thought this was the only way to get the money without telling you how bad her condition really is. Dad's head snapped up. What about her condition? Catherine made a small, choked sound. James swore under his breath. Even Michael looked away. The cancer's back, Dad, I said gently. It's spread. Mom didn't want you to know, because you just retired. She's been hiding the symptoms, but she needs more aggressive treatment. Soon. The bank statement finally fell from Dad's hands, drifting to the floor like a dead leaf. Helen. He whispered Mom's name like a prayer. That's why I've been coming over so much, I continued. Helping her cover it up, taking her to appointments while telling you we were going shopping. But last week, when I overheard their plan, I gestured to my siblings. I knew I had to stop them. This wasn't the way. So what? Catherine suddenly snarled. You're the hero now. The perfect daughter? At least we were trying to do something. By committing fraud, I stood up slowly. By framing me? By betraying Dad's trust and risking his freedom with fake offshore accounts. I had a plan, she insisted, but her voice wavered. No, I cut her off. You had desperation and greed. A plan would have been coming to me 3 months ago when you first found out about Mom. A plan would have been working together, legally, to help our parents. What do you mean? Dad asked. I pulled out another envelope. My company's been doing well. Very well. I've been trying to tell you all for months, but no one ever wanted to hear about my boring tech job. That bonus I got last quarter, it wasn't $50,000 like I told you. It was $500,000. More silence. More stares. I've already spoken with Mom's oncologist. I continued. My insurance can cover her as a dependent. The treatment she needs, it's approved. All of it. I tried to tell her last week, but she was too afraid of worrying you, Dad. Catherine's legs seemed to give out. She sank into the nearest chair. Why didn't you say something sooner? Would you have listened? I asked quietly. When have any of you ever listened to me about my work, my life, my success? It was easier to believe I was still the quiet bookworm who needed looking after. Easier to think you could frame me, because who would believe I had anything to lose? The sound of a car pulling into the driveway cut through the tension. Mom was back from her bridge club, which I knew had really been a doctor's appointment. So what happens now? James finally spoke, his voice rough. I looked at each of them in turn. That depends on Dad. I have evidence of attempted fraud, conspiracy, and bank access violations. The police would be very interested. You'd send your own siblings to jail, Catherine whispered. You were willing to send me, I reminded her. But no, I stopped the transfer in time. No actual theft occurred. If I turned to Dad, you want to press charges, that's your choice. But right now, I think Mom needs to know we all know the truth. About everything. The front door opened. Mom's footsteps in the hall. Her voice calling out a cheerful greeting that seemed to echo in the heavy silence. One more thing, I said, as her footsteps drew closer. The treatment starts Monday. I've already arranged medical leave from her teaching job. And Dad, I met his tear-filled eyes. Your retirement fund is safe. But maybe it's time to retire from keeping secrets in this family. Mom appeared in the doorway, her scarf arranged carefully to hide the weight loss none of us were supposed to notice. She froze, taking in the scene before her. Dad clutching forms, Catherine crumpled in a chair, James pale as a ghost, Michael wiping tears, and me. Me finally standing in my truth. Helen, Dad said softly, standing up. We need to talk. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows through the windows. In a few hours, everything would change. Truths would be spoken. Plans would be made. A family built on appearances would have to learn to be real. But for now, in this moment, I watched my mother's face as understanding dawned. Not just about her secret being revealed, but about how far her children had been willing to go. Some to help her, others to exploit her illness, and me, to protect not just our parents, but the very essence of what family should mean. The recording still sat on my phone, proof of betrayal and desperation. But maybe, just maybe, it could also become the catalyst for something else. Healing, honesty, and the kind of love that doesn't need schemes or secrets to survive. As Mom sank into Dad's waiting arms, I saw Catherine reach for her own phone, probably to call her lawyer. James started making excuses about needing to leave. But Michael met my eyes and mouthed 2 words. I'm sorry. It wasn't over. The aftermath of this day would ripple through our family for years to come. But at least now we were dealing with truth, not shadows. And sometimes, that's where healing begins. The morning after our family's darkest secrets spilled out, I sat in my office staring at emails I couldn't focus on. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. Mostly messages from Michael, a few terse texts from Dad about Mom's first oncology appointment, and dozens of missed calls from Catherine that I wasn't ready to answer. James hadn't tried to contact me at all, but his wife Rebecca had sent a single message. He's meeting with his lawyer. Be prepared. I already was. At 9:47, my assistant buzzed. Miss Sullivan, your brother Michael is here. I found him pacing my reception area, looking like he hadn't slept. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. I should have told you, he blurted out. When they first suggested it, I should have warned you. I led him into my office, noting how his eyes widened at the view of the city skyline. Like Catherine and James, he'd never bothered to visit my workplace before. Nice office, he said weakly. Guess you really have done well for yourself. Sit down, Michael, I said, gesturing to the leather chairs by the window. Tell me everything. What poured out over the next hour was worse than I'd imagined. Catherine's gambling debts, hidden from her surgeon husband. James's failing law practice, crushed under malpractice suits he'd never mentioned. They'd been desperate long before Mom's cancer returned. They thought Dad's retirement fund was the answer. Michael's voice cracked. Using your credentials, making it look like you'd stolen it. Catherine said she could make it trace back to offshore accounts she controlled. And you agreed to help them? I kept my voice neutral. He buried his face in his hands. I didn't know what else to do. Mom needs the treatment. And they said you wouldn't help even if we asked. That you'd become cold, focused only on your career. Did you ever think to actually ask me? We barely know you anymore, Amanda. He looked up. You missed the last 3 family Christmas parties. You're always working, always traveling. Catherine said. I interrupted softly. Did you ever think Catherine might be wrong? Before he could answer, my phone buzzed. Dad's message made my heart stop. Mom collapsed. We're at Memorial Hospital. Come now. The next few hours were a blur of hospital corridors and medical terms. Mom's oncologist explained that the cancer had spread more aggressively than they'd thought. She needed to start treatment immediately. I found Dad in the hospital chapel, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I should have known, he whispered as I sat beside him. All those bridge club meetings. The weight loss she blamed on a new diet. She was trying to protect you. And our children? His voice hardened. Were they trying to protect me too when they planned to steal my life savings? I took his hand. They were scared and desperate. But Dad, what they did, trying to frame me? That wasn't about Mom's treatment. That was about their own problems. As if on cue, my phone lit up with an email from James's lawyer, threatening legal action for defamation and illegal recording. I almost laughed. He still thinks he can bully his way out of this. Dad read the email over my shoulder, and something in him seemed to break. What happened to our family, Amanda? When did we become people who scheme and betray each other? Before I could answer, Catherine appeared in the chapel doorway. She looked terrible. Designer clothes wrinkled, makeup smeared. The doctor needs signatures for Mom's treatment, she said, not meeting our eyes. Then, barely audible, I can't afford to help with the payments anymore. Thomas found out about the gambling debts. Your brother James just threatened to sue me, I told her. Still think framing me was your best option. She flinched. I never thought. We assumed you were just a mid-level programmer. How were we supposed to know you'd become so successful? You could have asked, I said simply. Any time in the last 5 years. But you were all too busy believing I was still the little sister who needed protecting. Or in your case, exploiting. That's not fair. No, Dad cut in, his voice like steel. What's not fair is discovering my children were willing to destroy their sister to cover up their own mistakes. What's not fair is your mother fighting cancer alone, because we were all too wrapped up in appearances to see her suffering. Catherine started to cry. Not her usual elegant tears, but ugly, racking sobs that echoed in the small chapel. Thomas wants a divorce, she choked out. James is being disbarred. Michael's wife left him last night. Everything's falling apart. No, I stood up. Everything's finally coming into focus. The lies are falling apart. There's a difference. Just then, my phone buzzed again. A text from my assistant. FBI agents here asking about Catherine Sullivan and James Sullivan. Possible fraud investigation. I showed the message to Dad. He read it, closed his eyes for a moment, then looked at Catherine. Your sister stopped you from stealing my retirement fund, he said quietly. But what else have you done? What other schemes are out there, waiting to explode? Catherine's sobs turned to hiccups. James said he could fix everything. Use the retirement money to pay off our debts, then find most of it in Amanda's fake accounts. We'd be heroes, and she'd be in jail, but he said she deserved it for abandoning the family. I never abandoned anyone, I said sharply. I'd built something for myself. There's a difference. Dad stood up slowly. Catherine, go tell your mother you love her. Then go home and call a lawyer. A real one, not your brother, Amanda. The FBI can wait one day, I said, understanding what he wasn't asking. Mom's treatment starts tomorrow. That's what matters right now. As Catherine stumbled out of the chapel, Dad turned to me. Your mother and we failed somewhere. Raised children who could turn on each other like this. No, I touched his shoulder. You raised children who made their own choices. James chose arrogance. Catherine chose deception. Michael chose weakness. And I chose to stand alone, rather than be part of their schemes. And now, what do we choose now? I thought about the recording still on my phone, about James's threats and Catherine's tears, about Michael's remorse and Mom's quiet strength. Now we choose truth, I said, no matter how much it hurts. The next few weeks were a storm of lawyers, federal agents, and family therapy sessions. James was disbarred for multiple ethics violations beyond just the attempted fraud. Catherine's gambling addiction came to light, along with a trail of financial destruction that led to her divorce. Michael's wife came back, but their relationship was fragile. And Mom, she fought. The treatments were brutal, but she faced them with a grace that humbled us all. I moved her and Dad temporarily into my guest house, closer to the hospital and away from the media circus, as James and Catherine's crimes made local headlines. One evening, as Mom rested between treatments, Dad found me on the back patio. Your mother asked me something interesting today, he said, settling into a chair. She asked if we'd ever told you how proud we were of your success. I kept my eyes on the sunset. You didn't need to. Yes, we did, he sighed. Maybe if we paid more attention, valued your achievements instead of treating you like the little sister who needed protecting, maybe things would be different. Maybe, I agreed, but we can't change the past. No, but we can learn from it. He pulled out an envelope. I've updated my will. Everything goes into a trust that you'll manage. Not because you are the only one I trust with money now, but because you were the only one who never saw it as the most important thing. I thought about the recording that had started all this, about choices and consequences, about the difference between protecting family and enabling destruction. James's sentencing is next week, I said quietly. Catherine's rehabilitation program starts Monday. Michael's in therapy. Mom's numbers are improving. We're all finding our way back to some kind of truth. Dad reached over and took my hand. Thank you for stopping them, not just from stealing the money, but from becoming people who could live with that kind of betrayal. I squeezed his hand, remembering the little girl who once thought her family was perfect. We weren't perfect now, far from it, but maybe we were finally real. Inside, I could hear Mom's quiet laughter at something Michael was reading to her. The sound carried through the evening air like a reminder that even broken things can heal, given enough time and truth. The recording that had exposed everything was still on my phone, but I didn't need it anymore. Its purpose hadn't just been to stop a crime. It had been to shatter the mirrors we'd all been hiding behind, forcing us to finally see ourselves and each other clearly. As the sun set on another day of our new reality, I thought about family and forgiveness, about strength and redemption. The money had never been the real issue. It had just been the catalyst that revealed who we truly were, and more importantly, who we could choose to become. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more healing, more choices. But for now, in this moment, we were finally facing our truths together. And sometimes, that's the greatest victory of all. I never thought I'd see my father cry. Not like this. Not with rage contorting his face, as he waved the bank statement in the air, his hands shaking. The statement that showed their retirement account, nearly $2 million, had been drained 3 days ago. How could you do this to us, Amanda? His voice cracked. Your own parents. We were gathered in the living room of my childhood home, the same room where Mom had taught me piano, where Dad had helped me with math homework, where family photos still lined the walls in neat chronological order. Now it felt like a courtroom, and I was on trial. My brother James stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, jaw set in that self-righteous way I'd seen too often lately. My sister Catherine paced behind Dad's armchair, occasionally pausing to shoot venomous glares my way. Even my youngest brother Michael, usually the peacemaker, sat in stony silence. Well, Catherine demanded, nothing to say for yourself? I looked around at their faces I'd known all my life, faces now twisted with accusation and betrayal. The day started like any other Tuesday, except this one had been marked on our family calendar for weeks in bold red letters. Mandatory family meeting, 7 p.m. My mother's handwriting, always perfect, always demanding. I knew what was coming. They'd been building up to this intervention for months. I pulled into the familiar circular driveway of my parents' estate in my beat-up Honda Civic, deliberately parking it right next to my sister Amanda's gleaming Tesla. The contrast wasn't lost on anyone. That was the point. I checked my phone one last time. 6:57 p.m. 3 text messages from my realtor Marcus. All set for tomorrow. Paperwork complete. Congratulations on your new acquisition. I smiled faintly, tucked the phone away, and walked up to the grand entrance. I'd grown up passing through. Before I could reach for the doorbell, the heavy oak door swung open. There stood my mother, Catherine Peterson, perfectly coiffed as always, her disapproving gaze sliding from my sensible flats to my simple black dress. "You're late," she said, though we both knew I wasn't. "Hello to you too, Mom." The living room was already full. Dad sat in his usual leather armchair, pretending to read the Wall Street Journal, but really just avoiding eye contact. Amanda perched on the edge of the designer sofa, manicured fingers tapping against her phone screen. Her husband James lounged beside her, radiating that particular smugness that came with marrying into money and never letting anyone forget it. "Olivia," Amanda said, barely glancing up. "We were starting to wonder if you'd show." I took a seat in the straight-backed chair clearly left for me, the only uncomfortable piece of furniture in the room. Strategic positioning, classic Mom. Place the target where everyone can stare them down. "Now that we're all here," Mom began, standing in the center of the room like a prosecutor addressing a jury, "we need to discuss Olivia's situation." My situation? That's what they've been calling it for months now. Choosing to leave my 6-figure corporate job to start my own business. Moving out of my luxury condo into a modest apartment. Driving a practical car instead of leasing something flashy. Living within my means while I built something of my own. "Your father and I have been patient," Mom continued, each word precise as a knife cut. "We understood you needed to get this entrepreneurial phase out of your system. But it's gone on long enough. You're becoming an embarrassment to this family." I didn't react. I'd learned long ago that showing emotion in this house was like bleeding in shark-infested waters. "The charity gala is next month," Amanda chimed in. "Everyone's asking what you do now. And it's mortifying having to explain that my sister lives in some tiny apartment and drives a car that's practically falling apart." James nodded sagely. "Image is everything in this circle, Olivia. You know that." "We've decided," Mom declared, "that it's time for you to come back to reality. Your father has spoken to his friends at Goldman. They're willing to overlook this gap in your resume. You can start next month." I looked at Dad, who suddenly found his newspaper fascinating. "And," Mom added with a tight smile, "we found you a lovely condo in the right neighborhood. Much more suitable than that hovel you're living in now. James's friend Michael is single, and he's already expressed interest in getting to know you better." Of course he had. Michael Lambert, trust fund baby turned real estate developer, known for his ability to lose other people's money in spectacular fashion. I'd done my research on him months ago when he first approached me about investment opportunities. "Well?" Mom prompted when I didn't immediately respond with gratitude. "What do you have to say for yourself?" I opened my mouth to respond, but my phone chose that moment to buzz. The caller ID read, "Marcus Reynolds." Perfect timing. "Excuse me," I said politely. "I need to take this." Before Mom could object, I put the call on speaker. "Miss Peterson," Marcus's professional voice filled the room. "I'm calling to confirm that the sale has been finalized. Congratulations. You are now the official owner of the Wellington complex. All 300 luxury units, including the penthouse currently occupied by your family, are under your sole ownership. Would you like me to proceed with the planned rent adjustments we discussed?" The silence that followed was absolute. Amanda's phone slipped from her fingers. James's smug smile froze and cracked. Dad's newspaper lowered slowly, revealing wide eyes. And Mom looked like she'd been slapped. "The Wellington," she whispered. "But we live there." "Yes," I said calmly. You do. And now I own it. You see, while they thought I was failing, I was building. While they pitied me for living frugally, I was saving and investing. While they mocked my tiny business, it had grown into a property management empire, quietly acquiring buildings across the city. The Wellington was just the latest and most personal acquisition. But how? Amanda stammered. Those units cost millions. Funny thing about living below your means, I said, standing up. You end up having means beyond what people expect. I turned to Marcus's voice on the speaker. No rent adjustments needed right now, Marcus. Let's talk tomorrow about the renovation plans. Of course, Miss Peterson. Congratulations again. I ended the call and looked at my family's stunned faces. Now, about that charity gala next month. I think I will attend after all. As the owner of the venue, I should probably make an appearance, don't you think? Mom sank into Dad's armchair, her perfect posture crumbling. Olivia, I don't understand. No, I said softly. You never did. And that's exactly why we're here. I picked up my sensible handbag and headed for the door, pausing only briefly. Oh, and Mom? About that hovel I live in? I own that building too, along with half the block. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an early meeting tomorrow with my property management team. The sound of my practical shoes on their marble floor echoed to the silence. As I reached for the door handle, I heard Dad's voice for the first time that evening. Olivia, wait. But I was already walking out, smiling as I climbed into my practical Honda Civic. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's success they never saw coming. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my actual office. Not the small rental space my family thought I worked from, but the entire top floor of the Peterson Business Center downtown. Another property they didn't know I owned. Yet, I sat at my desk, reviewing the Wellington acquisition documents while my assistant, Sarah, briefed me on the morning schedule. Your mother has called 6 times since 6 a.m., she said, sliding a coffee across my desk. Your sister tried 4 times, and your father's secretary called to set up an urgent lunch meeting. I took a sip of the coffee, perfect as always. And I followed your instructions. No calls forwarded, no meetings scheduled. Good. I pulled up the Wellington's financial records on my dual monitors. Have Marcus send over the current lease agreements for all Wellington tenants, especially the penthouse. My phone buzzed again. Amanda. Olivia. This isn't funny anymore. Mom hasn't slept. Dad's furious. You need to explain yourself. We're family. You can't just... I let the message fade into my growing collection of unread texts. Family. Funny how that word only mattered when they needed something from me. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Miss Peterson? The board members are ready for you. I stood, straightening my tailored charcoal suit. Designer, but subtly so. No flashy labels needed when you own the building. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 12 of the city's top real estate developers, all men over 50, all watching me with new eyes. No longer the naive little girl they dismissed for years. Now they saw me as what I'd become, their largest competitor. Gentlemen, I began, taking my seat at the head of the table. Let's discuss the future of downtown development. 2 hours later, I'd secured 3 new property deals and established myself as a force they couldn't ignore. As the last board member left, Marcus lingered. Your father's firm called, he said carefully. They're interested in a partnership on the Riverside development. I smiled. Of course they were. That project would reshape the city's skyline. And they just realized who controlled it. Tell them all partnership inquiries need to go through proper channels. No family favors. Marcus nodded, then hesitated. There's something else. Your sister's husband, James. He's been asking questions about your other properties, trying to map out your portfolio. Let him try. I turned to look out over the city, my city, increasingly. He'll only find what I want him to find. By afternoon, the family grapevine was buzzing. My phone showed 30 missed calls, dozens of messages, and one very interesting email from James to his business partners. Need dirt on Olivia's companies. Anything you can find. I forwarded it to my legal team with one note. Watch him. At 3 p.m., the expected text from Amanda arrived. Mom's organizing an emergency family dinner tonight. 7 p.m. You have to come. I replied for the first time that day. Can't. Board meeting for my newest acquisition. Send my regrets. There was no board meeting. Instead, I had a private dinner scheduled with George Lambert, Michael's father and the city's biggest developer, the man my mother had been trying to get an audience with for years. The restaurant was exclusive, the kind of place that didn't list prices, because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. George was already seated when I arrived. Olivia. He stood, greeting me warmly. I have to admit, I've been looking forward to this. Not often someone builds an empire right under my nose without me noticing. I took my seat, accepting the wine list from the sommelier. Sometimes the best moves are the quiet ones. Indeed, he studied me thoughtfully. Your family seems quite surprised by your success. My son Michael was particularly interested in understanding how you managed it. Was he? I selected a wine, handed the list back. And here I thought he was only interested in losing other people's money in questionable developments. George laughed. Actually laughed. Sharp tongue to match that sharp mind. You know he's not used to being turned down. He's not used to a lot of things, like due diligence or profitable investments. The wine arrived, deep red and perfect. George raised his glass. To new partnerships? I met his eyes. That depends. Are you ready to discuss the Marina District project? His eyebrows rose. He kept that project under wraps for months. How did you? I make it my business to know things, Mr. Lambert. Like the fact that you're struggling to find financing since the environmental survey came back. I have a solution, if you're interested. For the next 2 hours, we talked business. Real business, not the social climbing my family thought I'd abandoned my career for. By dessert, we'd outlined a partnership that would transform the city's waterfront and make us both considerably richer. As we wrapped up, George's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and chuckled. Your mother just invited me to dinner next week. Quite insistent about it. Let me guess, she mentioned her talented daughter would be there. Actually, she mentioned your sister, Amanda. Something about her brilliant investment strategies. I couldn't help but laugh. Mom was still playing matchmaker, still pushing Amanda forward as the family success story. She hadn't realized the game had changed. Give her my regrets, I said, standing. I'll be in Singapore next week, closing a deal. George stood as well, extending his hand. You know, Olivia, I've been in this business 30 years. Made my fortune the old-fashioned way. Family money and connections. But you? You built this yourself, in secret, while your own family underestimated you. That's remarkable. I shook his hand firmly. Thank you, George, though I should thank them too. Being underestimated can be a powerful advantage. Outside, my driver waited with the car, not the Honda Civic my family knew, but a sleek black Mercedes I kept for business meetings. As we pulled away, my phone lit up with another message, this time from my father. "Olivia, please. We need to talk. Things don't have to be like this. We're family." I stared at those last two words for a long moment. Family. They kept using that word, but I don't think it meant what they thought it meant. Opening my laptop, I pulled up the Wellington lease agreements. Time to review the terms of my family's penthouse rental. After all, business was business, and I'd learned from the best how to separate family from finances. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more demands, more attempts to regain control. But for now, I had contracts to review and an empire to run. Let them have their emergency family dinner without me. I had bigger tables to sit at. 1 week later, I stood in my office, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of gold. Singapore had been productive. 3 new deals closed, 2 international partnerships secured. But the real drama was waiting for me back home. Sarah appeared in the doorway. "They're all here." I nodded, taking one last look at the empire I'd built. "In the main conference room?" "Yes, your mother, father, sister, James, and Mr. Lambert." That last name made me pause. "George Lambert?" "No," Sarah smiled slightly. "Michael. He insisted on being included. Said something about family interests." Of course he did. Mother's matchmaking hadn't died, even after everything. If anything, my success had made her more determined to push us together. The conference room fell silent as I entered. They sat around the massive oak table. Mother in her perfect Channel suit, Dad looking tired but determined, Amanda clutching James's arm like a lifeline, and Michael Lambert, trying to project confidence he didn't have. "Thank you all for coming," I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. "I understand you have concerns." Mother spoke first, her voice tight. "Concerns? You disappear for a week, ignore our calls, and now we find out you're partnering with George Lambert on the Marina project. This isn't like you, Olivia." I raised an eyebrow. "Actually, Mother, this is exactly like me. You just never bothered to notice." "Now see here," James leaned forward, all false authority. "We've been looking into your companies. The structures are unnecessarily complex. Multiple holding companies, offshore accounts. What are you hiding?" "Nothing," I said calmly. "I just learned early on to protect my interests. Speaking of which," I pressed a button on the intercom. "Sarah, please send in the auditors." The door opened, and 2 men in suits entered, carrying thick folders. James's face went pale. "What is this?" he demanded. "An audit, James, of all attempts to access my company records in the past week, including your rather clumsy efforts to hack into our servers." I opened one of the folders. "Section 47B of your Wellington lease agreement specifically prohibits corporate espionage against the building owner." That would be me. Amanda gasped. "James, what did you do?" "Nothing illegal," he protested. "I was protecting our family interests." "Your family interests?" I smiled coldly. "Or your hidden debts?" "Yes, James, I know about those too. The gambling losses, the failed investments, the money you've been siphoning from Amanda's trust fund." Amanda turned to him, face shocked. "What is she talking about?" "Don't listen to her." James stood up, pointing at me. "She's trying to turn us against each other. She's just jealous because she had to scratch and claw her way up while you what? I cut in. While you lost millions? While you lived off my sister's money? Please, continue. Mother intervened. Olivia, stop this. We're family. Whatever James has done. Family? I've opened another folder. Like when you tried to pressure the Wellington's management company to break their contract with me once you realized I was the buyer. Or when you called George Lambert to warn him against partnering with me. Dad finally spoke up. We were protecting you. You don't understand the business world. No, Dad, you don't understand. Not anymore. I stood, walking to the window. While you were all playing social games, I was building something real. Every property you thought was out of your reach, I own it. Every deal you couldn't close, I funded it. Every client you lost, they came to me. Michael Lambert chose that moment to speak. This is why you should have partnered with me when you had the chance. Together, we could. Could what? I turned back to face them. Lose money like you always do. Tell me, Michael, does your father know you're here? Does he know you're trying to interfere with our marina project deal? His face reddened. My father doesn't control me. No, but I could. One phone call about your attempted corporate espionage, and your family would cut you off completely. Shall I make that call? He fell silent. I pressed another button, and a scream descended from the ceiling. Let me show you something. Images appeared. Properties, developments, financial charts. This is what I've built. Not through family connections or inherited wealth, but through work. Real work. The numbers were staggering. Even Mother looked shocked. The Wellington? I continued. That was just the beginning. I own half the commercial real estate in the business district. 3 luxury residential complexes. The new downtown development project. And yes, the marina project with George Lambert. But why keep it secret? Amanda asked quietly. Why let us think you were struggling? I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. Behind the designer clothes and perfect makeup, I saw something new. Fear. Not of me, but of her own situation. Because, Amanda, you all needed to see something. Not just my success, but your own prejudices. How quickly you dismissed me. How easily you believed I was failing just because I wasn't living by your rules. I sat back down, opening one final folder. Now we have decisions to make. First, the Wellington. Your leases are up for renewal next month. James's corporate espionage voids his automatically, but the rest of you? You wouldn't evict your own family, Mother said, but her voice wavered. No, I agreed. I wouldn't. Instead, I'm offering you a choice. I slid documents across the table. New leases, fair market rate. No special treatment, no family discounts. Or what? Dad asked. Or you start treating me like family. Real family. Not someone to be controlled or married off or pushed aside. An equal. The room was silent as they looked at the papers. Amanda, I said softly, there's a position open in my company. Vice President of Client Relations. You're qualified, and more importantly, you're smarter than the role your husband and our parents pushed you into. It's yours if you want it. James started to protest, but Amanda held up her hand. I want to hear more. As for you, Dad, I continued, Goldman isn't the only game in town. My international division could use your experience. As a consultant, not a controller. He picked up the contract, reading carefully. And Mother, I smiled slightly. The charity gala you love so much. The venue's paid for. Permanently. Consider it a gift. From one businesswoman to another. She blinked rapidly, touching her perfect makeup. James, Michael, there's the door. Your security passes have been revoked. They started to argue, but my security team was already there, waiting quietly. The rest of you have 24 hours to decide, not about the leases or jobs, but about what kind of family we want to be. One that tears each other down, or one that builds each other up. I stood, gathering my papers. I have a dinner meeting with George Lambert. Amanda, if you're interested in that VP position, join us. We can discuss the details. As I walked out, I heard Amanda's chair scrape back. I'll get my coat. Mother called after me. Olivia, wait. I paused at the door. Yes. The Honda Civic. Was that just for show too? I smiled. No, Mother. That's my car. Because success isn't about what you drive or where you live. It's about what you build. I checked my watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an empire to run. The next morning, I arrived early at my office. Sarah met me with coffee and updates. Amanda accepted the position. Your father's reviewing the consulting contract. And your mother? Yes, she's in the lobby. Says she wants to learn. Really learn, this time. I looked out at my city, thinking about family power and the quiet strength it takes to succeed on your own terms. Send her up, I said. It's time for some real family business. Sometimes the biggest victories aren't in what you own, but in what you change. And as I watched the sunrise over my city, I knew the real work, the work of rebuilding my family into something stronger, was just beginning. But this time, we built it together, on my terms. I still remember the weight of that envelope in my hands, heavy, like the secrets it held, like the years of silence I'd carried. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and this is the story of how I learned that family ties aren't always what they seem. The morning started like any other Sunday. I was reviewing patient files in my small medical practice when my mother's text arrived. Family meeting. 3 p.m. Important discussion about Grandma Aliner's estate. Everyone must attend. I knew what this meant. 3 months had passed since Grandma Aliner's funeral, and the family had been circling like vultures around her property ever since. Especially my sister Victoria, who had always been the perfect daughter in my parents' eyes. Growing up, Victoria had mastered the art of appearance. Captain of the cheerleading squad, homecoming queen, married to a successful businessman by 23. Meanwhile, I chose a different path. Medical school, long hours, building my own practice from scratch. My parents never understood why I'd waste time on such a demanding career when I could have followed Victoria's example. But Grandma Aliner understood. She was different. A self-made woman who built her real estate empire from nothing in the 1960s, when female business owners were rare. She taught me that success isn't about pleasing others. It's about staying true to yourself. You remind me of myself at your age. She'd tell me during our secret Sunday morning coffee meetings. Never let anyone dim your light, Sarah. What my family didn't know was that those coffee meetings weren't just about advice. They were about legacy. I parked my car outside my parents' Tudor-style home at exactly 2:55 p.m. Victoria's new Mercedes already sat in the driveway, gleaming like a trophy. Inside, the familiar scent of Mom's cinnamon potpourri filled the air, mixing with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. The living room looked like a stage set for a power play. Mom and Dad sat on their leather sectional, Victoria and her husband James perched beside them like royalty. My younger brother Michael slouched in the corner, scrolling through his phone, trying to look disinterested, but failing. "Sarah," Mom said, her voice clipped. "You're late." I checked my watch. 3:01 p.m., actually. I'm right on time. Victoria smoothed her designer dress, a predatory smile playing at her lips. "Now that we're all here, I have an announcement." She stood, commanding attention like she'd done since high school. "As you know, Grandma Aliner's main property, the Victorian on Maple Street, has been in limbo since her passing. Well, I have wonderful news." She pulled out a document with flourish. "I've been talking with the family lawyer. Since I'm the only one who's married, with a proper family life, it makes sense for James and me to take ownership of the house. We need the space for our growing family, after all." My parents beamed. Of course they did. Victoria was giving them exactly what they wanted. A picture-perfect family to brag about at their country club. "The papers just need signatures," Victoria continued, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'm sure you all agree this is the best arrangement. Sarah's too busy with her little doctor's office to maintain a property like that. And Michael, well," she cast a dismissive glance at our brother. I sat there, letting her words wash over me. 3 months of planning, of watching them scheme, had prepared me for this moment. I reached into my bag and retrieved an envelope, thick, cream-colored, with Grandma Aliner's law firm's letterhead. "Before we sign anything," I said quietly, "I think we should review all the documents, including this one." Victoria's smile faltered slightly. "What's that?" "Something Grandma Aliner left with her lawyer. Instructions to be revealed only after certain conditions were met." I placed the envelope on the coffee table. The room grew still, like the moment before a storm breaks. "What conditions?" my father demanded, leaning forward. I smiled, remembering Grandma's words during our last coffee meeting. The condition was waiting to see who would try to claim what wasn't theirs to take. Victoria's face flushed. "What are you talking about? I've already spoken with..." "A family lawyer?" I interrupted. "Yes, I know. Mr. Harrison called me last week. Interesting how you forgot to mention our conversations, Victoria." My sister's perfectly manicured hands clenched into fists. "Open it," she snapped. I took my time, carefully breaking the seal. The papers inside were crisp, official, bearing Grandma Aliner's distinctive signature. "Read it," I said, sliding the document across the table, especially the last page. "I think you'll find it illuminating." As Victoria snatched up the papers, I sat back, remembering all those Sunday mornings with Grandma, all the lessons she taught me about patience, perseverance, and justice. The truth was about to change everything. Victoria's face went from confident to confused to ashen as she read. Her hands began to shake. This can't be right," she whispered. Mom grabbed the papers from Victoria's trembling hands. Her eyes widened as she scanned the contents. 6 months ago, I said into the silence, Grandma Aliner legally transferred ownership of not just the Victorian, but all her properties to me. She also left specific instructions about how the family would react and what that would reveal about their true characters. The room erupted into chaos. Victoria lunged for the papers. My father started shouting about family loyalty, and my mother burst into tears. But I remained calm, just as Grandma had taught me. "There's more," I continued, my voice cutting through their protests. "Much more. And if you're ready to listen, I'll explain exactly why Grandma Alina made the choice she did. The story I was about to tell would shatter their perfectly crafted illusions. But sometimes that's exactly what a family needs. The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. Victoria stood frozen, the inheritance papers still trembling in her hands. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red, while my mother dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. Always one for dramatics. You manipulated her. Victoria finally spat, her perfectly glossed lips twisting into a snarl. You turned Grandma Alina against us during those little coffee meetings of yours. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to a video I'd kept safe for months. Actually, Grandma Alina wanted to explain her decision herself. The family gathered around as I pressed play. Grandma Alina's face filled the screen, her silver hair neatly styled, her blue eyes sharp as ever. The video had been recorded in her lawyer's office just 2 months before she passed. If you're watching this, she began, then exactly what I predicted has happened. Victoria has tried to claim the Victorian house, and your parents have supported her decision without consideration for fairness or truth. Victoria tried to interject, but Dad shushed her, his eyes glued to the screen. For years, Grandma continued, I've watched this family's dynamics with growing concern. I've seen how Sarah was treated, pushed aside, criticized for her ambitions, expected to give way to Victoria's demands. But I've also seen something else. I've seen Sarah build a medical practice from nothing, just as I built my real estate business. I've seen her help patients who couldn't afford care, quietly paying their bills from her own pocket. Meanwhile, Victoria. Grandma's face hardened. Victoria and James have been living beyond their means for years. What this family doesn't know is that they've approached me multiple times for loans they never repaid. They've also tried to convince me to sign over properties to them, claiming they could manage them better. My mother gasped. Victoria's face had gone from red to white. But the final straw, Grandma continued, was what happened last Christmas. Victoria and James came to me with paperwork, asking me to sign what they claimed was a holiday card. I may be old, but I'm not foolish. It was a transfer deed for my entire portfolio, written in fine print they thought I wouldn't read. The video ended. The silence that followed was deafening. That's a lie, Victoria shrieked, but her voice wavered. James had suddenly become very interested in his shoes. I pulled out another document from my bag. Here's the deed they tried to trick her into signing. Grandma kept it as evidence. Would you like to explain this, Victoria? My sister's carefully constructed facade began to crack. We were just trying to help manage her affairs. She was getting older. She was sharp as ever. I cut in. Sharp enough to see through your scheme. Sharp enough to make her own decisions about her legacy. My father finally found his voice. But why you, Sarah? You've never shown any interest in real estate. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Really, Dad? Did you forget that I helped Grandma modernize all her property management systems 3 years ago? Or that I've been handling the maintenance coordination for her buildings while running my practice? Of course you did, because in this family, if Victoria doesn't do it, it doesn't count. But we're family, my mother pleaded, still clutching her handkerchief. We can work something out. Split things evenly, like you split your attention evenly when we were growing up. I asked quietly. Like you split the college fund evenly before giving Victoria my portion for her wedding? Or like you split holidays evenly before deciding Victoria's in-laws were more important? Michael, who had been silent until now, let out a low whistle. She's got you there, Mom. I stood up, gathering my things. The properties stay as Grandma Eleanor intended. I've already met with her management team, reviewed all accounts, and I paused, letting the next revelation sink in. Discovered some interesting financial discrepancies during Victoria and James's brief time helping with the books. James finally looked up, fear flashing across his face. Victoria grabbed his arm, her knuckles white. "What do you mean, discrepancies?" my father demanded. "I think that's a discussion Victoria and James should have with their lawyer," I replied calmly. "I've already forwarded the documentation to the relevant authorities." Victoria lunged forward, her composure completely shattered. "You can't do this to me. I'm your sister." "Yes, you are," I agreed. "And that's exactly why I'm doing this. Family doesn't mean enabling fraud, Victoria. It doesn't mean watching silently while you try to steal from our grandmother." I turned to my parents, who sat shell-shocked on their expensive couch. "Grandma Eleanor left something for you too. A letter explaining exactly how she felt about your treatment of both your daughters. Would you like to read it now, or should I have it delivered with the rest of the legal documentation?" My mother burst into fresh tears. My father's face had moved from red to purple. "You'll regret this," Victoria hissed. "We're not done." I smiled, remembering Grandma Eleanor's words from our last coffee meeting. "Actually, Victoria, we are. But don't worry, I'll make sure the Victorians' new owners maintain it beautifully." "New owners?" James sputtered. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm converting it into a medical residence for doctors in training. Affordable housing for people who actually want to help others." Grandma Eleanor loved that idea. As I walked toward the door, I heard Victoria's carefully curated world continuing to crumble behind me. But I wasn't finished. There was one more revelation to come, one that would shake this family to its very foundation. I turned back one last time. "Oh, and Victoria, you might want to check your mail tomorrow. There's something about your perfect marriage that Grandma Eleanor discovered during her final investigation. Something I think Mom and Dad will find very interesting." The color drained from both Victoria and James's faces. They knew exactly what I meant, and tomorrow, everyone else would know too. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, but the storm I'd set in motion was just beginning to break. I sat in my office, reviewing patient files when my phone started buzzing. First my mother, then my father, then a stream of family friends and relatives. I let them all go to voicemail. They'd had years to listen to me. Now it was my turn to control the conversation. At exactly 9:00 a.m., I knew the certified letters had been delivered. I timed everything perfectly, just as Grandma Eleanor had taught me. "Timing, Sarah," she'd said during one of our last meetings, "is the difference between justice and revenge." The first text came from Michael. "Holy shit, sis. You weren't kidding about Victoria's marriage. Mom's having a meltdown." I could imagine the scene at my parents' house as they read the private investigator's report Grandma Eleanor had commissioned before her death. The report revealed that James and Victoria's perfect marriage was built on a foundation of lies. Not only had James been embezzling from his company, which explained their mysterious wealth, but he had a second family in Boston, a wife and 2 children predating his marriage to Victoria. The proof was irrefutable. Marriage certificates, birth certificates, bank statements showing regular transfers, and photos of James at his other son's baseball games just last month. Victoria had to have known. The timeline proved she discovered the truth 3 years ago, but chose to maintain the facade, rather than lose her status as the family's perfect daughter. My phone rang again. This time, it was James. "What do you want?" I answered coolly. "Listen," he said, his voice desperate. "We can make a deal. I have connections, money." "Stolen money," I interrupted. "And no, we can't make a deal. The SEC has already been notified about your creative accounting at work. Grandma Alina made sure of that before she died." He hung up. Seconds later, Victoria's name flashed on my screen. I let it ring. Instead of answering, I opened my email and sent a pre-written message to our extended family, the country club board where my parents were members, and Victoria's social circle. Not to be cruel, but to ensure the truth couldn't be buried this time. Dear friends and family, in light of recent revelations about fraud, bigamy, and attempted theft from our late grandmother's estate, I feel compelled to share the complete documentation of these events. Attached, you'll find verified records that may help explain any sudden changes in Victoria and James's social status or living situation. The truth, though painful, is necessary. Regards, Sarah Mitchell, MD. Within an hour, my parents' house had become ground zero for a Category 5 hurricane of scandal. Victoria's carefully curated world was unraveling thread by thread. At 2:00 p.m., my office door opened. I looked up to find my father standing there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "You knew," he said quietly. "You knew everything." "Grandma Alina knew everything," I corrected him. "I just helped her document it." He sank into the chair across from my desk. "Your mother, she's not handling this well. And how did she handle it when Victoria stole my college fund? Or when she kicked me out for choosing medical school over the husband Victoria picked for me?" He flinched. "We thought we were doing what was best." "No," I cut him off. "You did what was easiest. Supporting Victoria was always easier than acknowledging that I might have chosen a better path. Can we?" He hesitated. "Can we fix this?" I pulled out another envelope, the last one. "Grandma Alina thought you might ask that. She left this for you and Mom. It's not just a letter this time. It's a choice." He took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside, I continued, "You'll find 2 documents. One is a commitment to family therapy, fully paid for by Grandma's estate. The other is a complete severance of family ties, including removal from all trusts and family accounts. You can't be serious." Deadly serious. Grandma Alina believed in second chances, but she also believed in earning them. "You have 24 hours to decide. Do you want to rebuild this family the right way? Or do you want to cling to the lies you've told yourselves?" He stared at the envelope for a long moment. "And Victoria has her own choice to make. The evidence of James's fraud has already been submitted to the authorities. She can cooperate with the investigation or go down with him. That's her decision." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Victoria just tried to access her offshore accounts. They're frozen. She's screaming about buying a ticket to Boston to kill that bastard. Should I call someone?" I smiled slightly. "Justice has its own timeline," I told my father. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have patients waiting." He stood slowly, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. At the door, he paused. "We really messed up, didn't we?" "Yes," I said simply. "But that's not the important part. The important part is what you do next." After he left, I walked to my office window, looking out at the city Grandma Alina had helped build. The Victorian house stood in the distance, its elegant spires reaching toward the sky. By next month, it would be full of young doctors, starting their careers with the same determination I'd had. My phone buzzed one final time. A message from Victoria. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed everything. I typed back a single line. No, Victoria. You did that yourself. I just turned on the lights. Then I switched off my phone, picked up my next patient's file, and got back to work. Because that's what Grandma Eleanor taught me. Success isn't about destroying others. It's about building something meaningful from the ashes of what they tried to destroy in you. 3 months later, I sat in my favorite coffee shop, the same one where Grandma Eleanor and I used to meet. My parents had chosen therapy, though Victoria hadn't spoken to any of us since James's arrest. Michael had moved into one of the smaller properties, returning to college with a new appreciation for honest work. As I sipped my coffee, I opened Grandma Eleanor's journal, her last gift to me. On the final page, she'd written, "Dearest Sarah, remember that strength isn't about having power over others. It's about having the courage to stand firm when others try to take your power away. You've always been my true heir, not because of what you'll inherit, but because of what you've built. Keep building, keep healing, keep standing tall. Love, Grandma Eleanor." I closed the journal, smiling as I watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of possibility. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what's written in a will. It's the strength to finally stand up and say, "No more." The Victorian house stood proud against the morning light, its windows gleaming with promise. Inside, young doctors were already starting their days, carrying forward the legacy of healing and hope that had always been my true inheritance. And somewhere, I knew, Grandma Eleanor was smiling. The crystal glasses clinked against bone china as my mother set the table for our mandatory Sunday dinner. Everything had to be perfect, as always. The Williams family image needed to be maintained, even if it was just for show. I'm Emily Williams, though my family barely acknowledges the Williams part anymore. At 32, I'm the disappointment, who chose to work in tech instead of joining the family's luxury car dealership empire. The black sheep who wore jeans to country club meetings and suggested modernizing our accounting systems when I was just 19. Emily, my mother called from the dining room, her voice carrying that familiar note of disapproval. Your father wants everyone here by 6 sharp. And please, wear something appropriate this time. I glanced down at my casual blazer and silk blouse. The outfit probably cost more than her entire dining set, but she'd never know that. I'd learned long ago to keep my success quiet, to let them think I was struggling in my little computer job, as they called it. If they only knew. The truth was, I'd been 3 steps ahead of them for years. While they bragged about their 5 dealerships across the state, I was building something much bigger. But tonight, everything would change. They'd forced my hand, and now it was time to show them exactly who they'd been looking down on all these years. I arrived at 5:55 p.m., parking my modest Volvo behind my brother, Marcus's shiny new Porsche. He'd always been the golden child, following in our father's footsteps, playing the part of the dutiful son. He was also running their business into the ground with his gambling habit and risky investments, but heaven forbid anyone mention that at Sunday dinner. The house was exactly as it had been since my childhood, a sprawling colonial mansion that screamed old money, even though our family's wealth only went back 2 generations. My grandfather had built the dealership from nothing. But my father, Richard Williams, preferred to pretend we had blue blood going back centuries. "You're almost late," my mother said by way of greeting, eyeing my clothes with barely concealed disdain. "Almost isn't late, Mom," I replied, hanging my coat in the foyer. "How's the new country club membership going?" She stiffened slightly. They didn't know I knew about their rejection from the Preston Valley Club. The third such rejection this year. Their social standing wasn't what it used to be, though they were desperately trying to hide it. In the dining room, Marcus was already seated, his wife Jessica beside him, both of them looking like they'd stepped out of a luxury car commercial. My father stood at the head of the table, swirling his whiskey like he was starring in his own movie about wealthy patriarchs. "Emily," he nodded curtly, "glad you could tear yourself away from your computers." I smiled, taking my seat. If he only knew that those computers had helped me build a tech empire worth billions, or that I owned controlling shares in 3 major software companies. But tonight wasn't about my success. It was about their failure and the choice they were about to make. "Now that everyone's here," my father began, setting down his glass with practiced authority, "we need to discuss some family business." Here it comes, I thought, maintaining my calm expression. "The dealerships are entering an exciting new phase of expansion," he continued, though I could see the strain around his eyes. "We're planning to acquire 3 new locations by year's end." I knew this was a lie. Their latest financial reports, which they didn't know I had access to, showed they were barely staying afloat. Marcus's gambling debts and failed side ventures had boiled them dry, and their attempts to compete with modern car-buying apps were failing miserably. "That's wonderful, dear," my mother beamed, passing the roasted potatoes. "Emily, you really should reconsider joining the family business. It's not too late to give up this coding phase." I took a small serving of potatoes, noting how Jessica's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her wine glass. She knew about Marcus's debts, had probably been the one writing checks to cover them. "Actually," my father cleared his throat, "that's part of what we need to discuss. Emily, your grandfather's trust fund, the one you've been using as collateral for business loans." I interrupted quietly. The room went silent. My father's face reddened slightly. "How did you?" he started, but caught himself. "That's privileged information." "Is it?" I took a sip of water. "Like the 3 rejected loan applications this month, or the foreclosure notice on the downtown dealership?" Marcus's fork clattered against his plate. "Dad, what is she talking about?" "Nothing," my father snapped. "Emily's obviously been poking around where she doesn't belong. But that ends now." He straightened in his chair, attempting to reclaim his authority. "We're cutting you off, Emily. No more trust fund, no more family support. Clearly you don't understand loyalty or family values." My mother gasped appropriately, right on cue. Jessica stared at her plate. Marcus tried to smirk but couldn't quite manage it. I set down my water glass carefully. "Before you continue, Dad, maybe you should take a look at this." I pulled out my phone, opening a particular folder I'd prepared for this moment. "What's that supposed to be?" he scoffed. "The truth," I said simply, turning the screen toward him, "about who really owns Williams Automotive Group. All of it." As my father's eyes scanned the document, his face went from red to white faster than I thought possible. Because there, in clear corporate documentation, was proof that his daughter, the one he was about to cut off, had secretly become his company's majority shareholder 6 months ago. And that was just the beginning of what I had to show them. The silence that followed felt like a vacuum, sucking all the air from my mother's perfectly decorated dining room. My father's hands trembled as he held my phone, his eyes locked on the screen that showed exactly who owned his precious empire. This is impossible, he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Is it? I took my phone back, swiping to the next document. Like it was impossible that Marcus lost $2.4 million at the Bellagio last month. Or impossible that Mom's been forging your signature on loan applications. My mother's wine glass slipped from her fingers, splashing red across her pristine white tablecloth. Marcus looked like he might vomit. How did you? Jessica started, but I cut her off. How did I know? Or how did I acquire controlling interest in a company that's been hemorrhaging money for years? I pulled out my laptop, opening it to a presentation I'd prepared. Let me show you exactly how the daughter you dismissed built an empire right under your noses. The screen displayed a simple timeline, starting 8 years ago. Remember when I suggested modernizing our systems, Dad? When I said cryptocurrency and tech investments were the future? You laughed. Called it internet funny money. Well, I clicked to the next slide, showing my first company's valuation. $500 million. That's just the beginning. I continued, watching their faces drain of color. While you were busy buying country club memberships and covering up Marcus's gambling, I was building something real. My father found his voice. You're lying. These numbers are all verified, I interrupted, by the same accountants who've been trying to warn you about the dealership's imminent collapse. Would you like to see their latest report? I clicked again, displaying the devastating financial analysis of Williams Automotive Group. Red numbers filled the screen. Debts, losses, failed investments. Did you really think nobody would notice the shell companies Marcus set up to hide his casino losses? I asked, turning to my brother. Or the way Mom's been moving money between accounts to cover the bounced checks. Marcus slumped in his chair, his perfect posture finally breaking. Jessica reached for her purse, probably checking for her car keys, planning her escape. But here's what really interested me, I continued, clicking to another document. The loan applications. 3 different banks, all using grandfather's trust fund as collateral. The same trust fund you just tried to take from me. My mother's hands fluttered to her throat, a nervous tell I remembered from childhood. Emily, darling, we can explain. No need. I cut in. The SEC will handle the explanations. They're very interested in some of these transactions. The word SEC hit like a thunderbolt. My father's face went from white to gray. You wouldn't, he whispered. We're family. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Family? Was it family when you told potential investors I was mentally unstable because I warned them about Marcus's schemes? Or when you tried to have me removed from grandfather's trust because I refused to invest in your failing expansion plans? I stood, walking to the window that overlooked their perfectly manicured lawn. 6 months ago, I could have reported everything: the fraud, the embezzlement, the forged documents. But instead, I did something better. I started buying shares through various shell companies. Small amounts at first, then larger ones as your desperation grew. Every time Marcus needed to cover a gambling debt, every time Mom's credit cards got maxed out, I was there, buying up pieces of the company at bargain prices. Why? Marcus finally spoke, his voice cracking. Why not just turn us in? I turned back to face them. Because grandfather built this company from nothing. He believed in honest work, in building something real. And watching you destroy it piece by piece, I couldn't let that happen. I clicked to the final slide. It showed my complete portfolio, not just the dealerships, but my tech companies, real estate holdings, and investment funds. The total number at the bottom made my mother actually gasp. My father squinted at the screen. That's over $3 billion. 3.7, I corrected quietly. And that's just the liquid assets. Jessica stood abruptly. I need some air. Sit down, I said firmly. Everyone needs to hear this next part. She sank back into her chair, looking like she might faint. Tomorrow morning, the board of directors will receive a complete audit of the company's finances. Every transaction, every hidden account, every forged signature. They'll also receive my proposal for restructuring. Restructuring? My father's voice had lost all its usual authority. Yes, you have two choices. I closed my laptop carefully. Option 1. You all resign immediately. Sign the paperwork I've prepared, admit to your roles in the financial misconduct, and accept the consequences. In return, I'll ensure the company survives and your reputations aren't completely destroyed. The room was so quiet, you could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hall. And option 2? Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. I smiled, the same cold smile my father had given me countless times over the years. Option 2 is I step back and let the SEC handle everything. They're particularly interested in those offshore accounts you set up last month, Marcus. The ones in Jessica's maiden name. Jessica's head snapped up, her eyes wide with betrayal as she stared at her husband. Apparently, she hadn't known about those accounts. You have until midnight to decide, I continued, gathering my things. Though given the federal agents currently parked outside the downtown dealership, I'd suggest deciding quickly. My father stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You planned all this? Tonight? The dinner? Everything? No, Dad. You planned this. Every time you dismissed me, every time you covered up Marcus's mistakes, every time you chose appearance over reality, you planned this. I just took notes and waited. I walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Mom? The Preston Valley Country Club didn't reject your application. I bought it last year and had them blacklist you. Consider it payback for all those holiday dinners you forgot to invite me to. The sound of my mother bursting into tears followed me out into the hallway. But I wasn't finished. There was one more revelation to come. One that would shake this family to its very foundation. I turned back one last time. Before you make your decision, you might want to ask Marcus about the real reason grandfather changed his will 2 days before he died. About the conversation they had in the hospital and the security camera footage I have from that night. Marcus's face went completely blank. He knew exactly what I was talking about. And soon, so would everyone else. The next morning dawned clear and cold, the kind of autumn day my grandfather used to love. I sat in his old office at the downtown dealership, now my office, watching the sun rise over the city he'd helped build. The leather chair still smelled faintly of his cigars, a scent that had always meant safety and wisdom to me. My phone had been buzzing since 5 a.m. First Jessica, then my mother, then a stream of family friends and business associates. I let them all go to voicemail. They had years to listen. Now they could wait. At exactly 9:00 a.m., my assistant knocked on the door. They're here. I nodded, straightening the files on my grandfather's mahogany desk. Send them in. My family filed in like mourners at a funeral. My father had aged overnight, his usual swagger replaced by a haunted stoop. My mother's makeup couldn't hide her sleepless night. Marcus looked hungover, and Jessica kept her distance from him, her wedding ring conspicuously absent. "Sit," I said quietly, gesturing to the chairs arranged before the desk. They sat without argument, a first in family history. "Before we discuss your decisions," I began, "let's address what happened in this room 8 months ago." I pressed a button on my laptop, and the large screen on the wall flickered to life. Security camera footage appeared, showing this very office. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., the night before my grandfather died. Marcus entered, looking furtive. Our grandfather sat in the same chair I now occupied. "Turn it off," Marcus pleaded. "No," I said firmly. "Everyone needs to see this." On screen, Marcus paced, agitated. The audio was crystal clear. "You can't change the will, Grandpa. You can't give everything to Emily." Our grandfather's voice, though weak, carried his characteristic steel. "Emily understands business, Marcus. Real business, not just appearances. She'll preserve my legacy." "She abandoned the family," Marcus shouted. "She plays with computers while I've given everything to this company." "Given?" Grandfather laughed weakly. "You've taken boy, stolen, gambled. I know about Geneva." My mother gasped. Geneva, where Marcus had lost $5 million of company money in a single weekend. "Emily figured it out," Grandfather continued on screen. "Brought me the proof weeks ago. But unlike you, she wanted to protect the family name. Give you a chance to make it right." The next part was harder to watch. Marcus, desperate and angry, grabbing our grandfather's heart medication, holding it out of reach. "Sign it back to me," he demanded. "Right now." Instead, Grandfather pressed the silent alarm under his desk. As security rushed in, he looked directly at the camera, directly at me, watching now, and mouthed, "Trust Emily." He died the next morning. The official cause was heart failure. I stopped the footage. The room was deathly silent. "The police have a copy of this," I said into the quiet, along with the toxicology report showing elevated levels of stress hormones from that confrontation. "You killed him," my mother whispered, staring at Marcus. "Your greed killed your own grandfather." Marcus buried his face in his hands. Jessica had moved even further away from him, her face a mask of disgust. "Now," I continued, opening the first file on the desk, "let's discuss your decisions about my offer." My father cleared his throat. "We'll sign whatever you want." "Good, because what I want is to set things right." I started distributing documents. "Here's how this will work." Over the next hour, I laid out the new reality. My father would take early retirement, citing health reasons. Marcus would enter a private rehabilitation program for his gambling addiction, non-negotiable and closely monitored. My mother would step down from all charity boards, social clubs, and public positions. "The company will survive," I explained, watching them sign page after page. "I've already lined up partnerships with 3 major tech firms to modernize our sales platform. The Williams name will continue to mean something in this city, just not what you thought it meant." "And us?" my mother asked quietly. "What happens to us?" I leaned back in Grandfather's chair. "You'll receive living allowances. Modest ones, enough to maintain decent lives, but not your current excesses. Marcus's debts will be paid off to prevent legal consequences, but he'll work a regular job, earning regular wages, once he completes rehabilitation." "A regular job?" Marcus looked horrified. "Yes, Marcus, like regular people. like I did when I started my tech company, working 80-hour weeks while you were flying private jets to Monaco. I turned to Jessica. You have a choice too. The prenup Marcus had you sign is void. I've made sure of that. You can leave now with a generous settlement, or stay and accept the new circumstances. She stood without hesitation, placing her keys to their mansion on the desk. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. With that, she walked out, head high, never looking back at Marcus. My father spoke up, his voice rough. Why not just destroy us completely? Why show any mercy? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out an old photograph. In it, a much younger version of my father stood beside my grandfather in front of the first Williams dealership. Both were smiling, proud, genuine. Because of him, I said, placing the photo on the desk. Because grandfather believed in redemption. He gave you a chance when you were young, Dad. Now I'm doing the same. I stood, signaling the end of the meeting. The papers will be filed today. The press release about the reorganization goes out at noon. Your resignations will be described as a planned succession, allowing you all to save face. Don't make me regret this, Mercy. They filed out slowly, shoulders bowed, faces drawn. My mother paused at the door. You're exactly like him, she said softly. Your grandfather. We should have seen it sooner. Yes, I replied. You should have. After they left, I walked to the window, looking out at the dealership lot where I used to play as a child. The morning sun glinted off rows of new cars, each one representing the legacy my grandfather had built and I had saved. My phone buzzed, a news alert. The technology sector was praising the Williams Automotive Group's innovative new digital sales platform. Our stock was up 12% in pre-market trading. The future was already arriving. I sat back down in my grandfather's chair, opening his old ledger. Inside, he'd written something on the last page just days before his death. Dear Emily, power isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself when others give you reason not to. You understand that? It's why you'll succeed where they failed. Love, Grandpa. I closed the ledger, smiling slightly. The empire wasn't just saved, it was transformed. And the daughter they dismissed had become the architect of its future. 3 months later, I stood in the main showroom, watching as our new digital display systems were installed. The Williams Automotive Group had become the talk of the industry, pioneering a hybrid model of online and traditional car sales that was revolutionizing the market. My father had settled into quiet retirement, taking up golf and staying away from business entirely. My mother had found a surprising peace and a simpler life, even starting to volunteer at a local food bank. Marcus was 6 weeks into his rehabilitation program, finally facing his demons. As for me, I kept grandfather's chair, his ledger, and his belief in building something real. The billions I'd earned in tech were now building something even bigger, a legacy that would honor his name and prove that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction, it's construction. Standing there in the gleaming showroom, I took out my phone and deleted all the angry voicemails I'd saved from years of family dinners. I didn't need them anymore. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And I had done exactly that. The mahogany conference table gleamed under the fluorescent lights of Barrett and Associates' main boardroom. 12 faces stared back at me, each wearing a carefully crafted mask of professional concern. But I knew better. I'd seen the same expressions 6 years ago, when I first walked into this room as a junior partner, young and naive, believing that hard work and loyalty actually meant something. I'm Sarah Barrett. No relation to the company's founder. Just a coincidence that had sparked endless jokes during my early days here. Now, at 34, I was about to witness just how quickly a decade of dedication could be erased with a single vote. CEO Michael Thompson sat at the head of the table, his Mont Blanc pen tapping an impatient rhythm against his leather portfolio. "Shall we begin?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. Nothing was a question with Michael, just carefully orchestrated moves in his endless game of corporate chess. I adjusted my blazer, a simple black Armani that cost more than my first month's salary. "Before we start, I'd like to review the quarterly numbers." Michael's smile tightened. "That won't be necessary, Sarah. We have more pressing matters to discuss." Of course we did, like how they planned to push me out without triggering the clause in my contract that would cost them millions in severance, or how they'd explain to our clients that the person who'd built their trust over the past decade was suddenly pursuing other opportunities. I opened my laptop anyway, ignoring the collective sigh of irritation around the table. First quarter revenues up 42% year over year. Client retention at 98%, the highest in company history. New account acquisition exceeded targets by... "Sarah," Michael cut in, his voice sharp. "This meeting isn't about numbers." I looked up, met his gaze. "Isn't it?" "Because I thought that's what we did here. Focus on results. Or has that changed since last month's partnership meeting when you said, and I quote, 'Performance is everything'?" A few board members shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. They knew what was coming. They'd probably rehearsed their roles in this little coup. "The board has concerns," Michael continued, pulling out a thick folder, "about your management style." I almost laughed. My management style had built this firm's client portfolio from regional accounts to Fortune 500 companies. My style had transformed Barrett and Associates from a mid-tier consulting firm into an industry leader. "What concerns specifically?" I asked, though I already knew. This wasn't about management style. This was about power, about control, and about the fact that I'd refused to play by their unwritten rules. "There have been complaints," Victoria Pierce, the HR director, chimed in, "about your aggressive approach to client retention." "Aggressive?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean successful?" "Some feel you've developed inappropriately close relationships with clients," Michael added, "creating potential risk for the firm." Now I did laugh. Just once, sharp and cold. Inappropriate relationships? Like the kind you tried to cultivate with Margaret Chen at State Corp before she shut you down and requested to work exclusively with my team. Michael's face reddened. That had been a particularly embarrassing episode for him. Losing a $50 million account because he couldn't take no for an answer. "The board has voted," he said, pushing a document across the table. "Effective immediately, you're being removed from your position as managing partner of client relations." I didn't touch the paper. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened my email, and waited. "Your access to company systems will be terminated within the hour," Victoria added, trying to sound sympathetic. "It is already." "Did any of you actually read my contract?" I interrupted, looking around the table. "The one you all signed when you made me the youngest partner in firm history." Blank stares. Of course they hadn't. They'd been too busy celebrating their brilliant move of promoting a young woman to partnership, perfect for their diversity reports and industry press. Section 7.3. I continued. In the event of involuntary termination, all client relationships personally cultivated by the partner revert to their exclusive management. That's standard language, Michael scoffed. It doesn't mean. It means exactly what it says. I cut in. And as of 8 minutes ago, when you called this vote, 247 clients received automated emails informing them of my departure and the immediate termination of their contracts with Barrett and Associates. The room erupted in chaos. Phones started buzzing. Laptops flew open. Victoria's face went pale as she frantically scrolled through her messages. You can't do this. Michael stood up, his carefully maintained composure cracking. Those are company clients. No, I said calmly, standing to match his posture. They're my clients. Every single one of them signed engagement letters with me personally. Check the paperwork. Oh wait, you can't. Because none of you ever bothered to read the contracts I drafted. This is illegal, someone shouted. We'll sue. Go ahead, I smiled. I'm sure the press will love hearing how Barrett and Associates treats its female partners. How you tried to force me out because I wouldn't let you take credit for my success. How you... Enough. Michael slammed his hand on the table. What do you want? Want? I picked up my bag, closed my laptop. I don't want anything from you. I just thought you should know what you're actually voting on today. Not just my removal, but the loss of 82% of the firm's revenue. Clients who trust me, not the Barrett and Associates logo. The non-compete, Victoria started, doesn't apply in cases of involuntary termination. I finished for her. Section 12.1. You really should read these things before you sign them. My phone buzzed again. More client emails flooding in, confirming their contract terminations. Some already asking about my next move. You've built nothing without us. Michael spat. You think clients will follow you? You're nothing but a... Careful, I warned. You're already facing a massive revenue loss. Let's not add a discrimination lawsuit to your problems. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and Michael? Remember that merger you've been working on with Western Group? The one you're announcing next week? I had breakfast with their CEO this morning. Fascinating how quickly plans can change when people learn the truth about a company's leadership. The blood drained from his face. The merger had been his crown jewel, his guarantee of a corner office in the new combined firm. You wouldn't. I already did. Check your phone. The press release should be hitting any minute now. I left them there, surrounded by buzzing phones and panicked whispers. In the elevator, I finally let myself smile. Not because I'd won, though I had, but because for the first time in 10 years, I felt free. My real office wasn't in this building anyway. It was in a converted warehouse across town, where for the past year, I'd been quietly building my own consulting firm. A place where success would be measured by merit, not politics. Where loyalty would actually mean something. And tomorrow, when the dust settled, and the reality of what they'd lost hit home, I'd be ready. Ready to show them exactly what they'd thrown away. But first, I had some clients to call. The next morning dawned cold and bright, sunlight glinting off the steel and glass towers of downtown. I sat in my real office, not the corporate showcase I'd left behind at Barrett and Associates, but the converted industrial space. I'd been preparing for this exact moment. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since yesterday. First came the panic calls from Barrett's board members, then their lawyers, and finally, predictably, Michael himself. His voice strained as he left message after message about discussing terms and finding common ground. I let them all go to voicemail. Instead, I focused on the emails from clients. 212 of them had already confirmed they were following me to my new venture. 35 more wanted meetings to discuss terms. Only 3 had expressed hesitation, and those were the ones I'd always known were more aligned with Michael's old-school networking approach. The press is here. Maya, my new chief of operations, said from the doorway. She'd left Barrett and Associates 6 months ago, officially for family reasons. In reality, she'd been helping me build this parallel organization from the ground up. I nodded, straightening my navy suit. Let's not keep them waiting. The conference room, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows, was packed with reporters. Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg. Word had spread fast about Barrett and Associates' implosion. Ms. Barrett, a reporter from Reuters, jumped in first. Sources say you've taken nearly 80% of Barrett and Associates' client base with you. How do you respond to accusations of corporate sabotage? I smiled, taking my place at the podium. I didn't take anything. I simply reminded clients of their contractual rights when Barrett's leadership decided to breach our partnership agreement. And the Western Group merger? Someone else called out. Was it your intention to derail that deal? I merely shared some concerns about Barrett's leadership culture with Western's board. They made their own decisions based on that information. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another call from Michael. Delete. Is it true that you've been planning this for over a year? Another reporter asked. That you deliberately cultivated personal relationships with clients knowing you'd eventually leave. I cultivated those relationships because that's what good business is about. Trust, personal connection, and genuine commitment to client success. If Barrett's leadership saw that as a threat rather than an asset, well, I paused, letting the implications sink in. That says more about them than me. The questions continued for another hour. I answered each one carefully, never letting emotion crack my professional veneer. But inside, I was smiling at how perfectly everything had fallen into place. After the press conference, I had back-to-back video calls with major clients. Most just wanted reassurance that their projects would continue smoothly under my new company, Adelan Consulting Group. Sarah, Margaret Chin from State Corp said during our call, I have to admit, I've been waiting for this. The way they treated you, it was only a matter of time. You knew? She laughed. Everyone knew. We just wondered when you'd finally stop letting them take credit for your work. By early afternoon, the financial impact of my departure was becoming clear. Barrett and Associates stock had dropped 40% since opening. Trading was temporarily halted twice to prevent further freefall. Maya brought me the latest numbers. They've lost over $300 million in market value since yesterday. Board members are starting to jump ship. I was reviewing the data when my office door burst open. Michael Thompson stood there, face red, security rushing up behind him. It's okay? I told the guards. Let him have his moment. You destroyed everything, he snarled, stalking into my office. Years of work, millions in value, all because your ego couldn't handle a simple leadership transition. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. He looked older somehow, diminished without his expensive office and corporate backdrop. Interesting perspective, I said calmly. Here's mine. I spent a decade building relationships you took for granted. I brought in clients you couldn't land. I delivered results while you played golf and called it networking. And when you tried to push me out, because I wouldn't play by your boys' club rules, you discovered that those relationships belonged to me, not your corporate logo. We made you, he shouted. You were nothing before Barrett and Associates. I stood up slowly. No, Michael, I made me. And I made Barrett and Associates what it is today. Or rather, what it was yesterday. The board is preparing legal action, he threatened. We'll freeze your assets, block your clients. With what evidence? I asked, opening my laptop. The contracts you never read? The client agreements that explicitly give them the right to follow their chosen representative. Or maybe you'd like to explain to a judge why you violated every clause of our partnership agreement. He deflated slightly, the reality of his position finally sinking in. What do you want? He asked, voice hoarse. Name your price to return the clients. I walked to the window, looked out at the city skyline. They're not commodities to be traded, Michael. They're relationships built on trust, something you never understood. Please, he said, and I heard real fear in his voice now. The firm won't survive this. No, I agreed. It won't. At least not as you knew it. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe it's time for a new kind of consulting firm. One that values merit over politics, results over rhetoric. My phone buzzed again. Western Group's CEO requesting a meeting to discuss transferring their business to Avalon. Security will show you out, I said, turning back to my desk. Oh, and Michael? The corner office you wanted in the merged firm? I hear it has a great view of the unemployment line. After he left, Maya brought in the afternoon reports. More clients confirming their transfer to Avalon. More Barrett and Associates employees sending their resumes. The marketplace responding exactly as I'd predicted. They never saw it coming. Maya mused, sorting through the papers. All those years, they thought they were in control. I smiled, remembering all the late nights, the missed holidays, the countless times I'd swallowed my pride while they took credit for my work. Control is an illusion, I said. Real power comes from building something people can't afford to lose. And I was just getting started. 1 month after the board meeting that changed everything, I stood in my new office at Avalon Consulting Group, watching the sun rise over the city. The morning news played silently on a wall-mounted screen, showing footage of Barrett and Associates' latest crisis. Former industry giant faces bankruptcy amid mass client exodus. My phone lit up with a message from Maya. Barrett's board called an emergency meeting. Word is they're discussing liquidation options. I set my coffee down and opened my laptop to review the morning numbers. Avalon had successfully transitioned 238 of Barrett's former clients, representing over $400 million in annual revenue. Our staff had grown from the initial team of 20 to 150, many of them former Barrett employees who jumped ship once they saw which way the wind was blowing. Ms. Barrett? My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Victoria Pierce is here to see you. I smiled. I'd been wondering when Barrett's HR director would show up. Send her in. Victoria looked different without her corporate armor. The designer suit was the same, but her posture had changed. Less rigid, more desperate. Sarah, she started, then stopped, seeming unsure how to continue. Have a seat, Victoria. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. I assume this isn't a social call. She sat, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. The board, they want to discuss terms. Terms? I raised an eyebrow. For what exactly? A merger, or rather, an acquisition. They're prepared to offer you controlling interest in Barrett and Associates in exchange for... I cut her off with a laugh. You want me to buy the company I just destroyed. The same company that tried to force me out. It's a good offer, she pressed. The Barrett name still has value, and with your client base. My client base is perfectly happy where they are, I interrupted. But I'm curious. Whose idea was this? Michael's? Victoria's silence was answer enough. Let me guess, I continued. He thought he could appeal to my ego. Offer me the chance to own the company that rejected me? Classic Michael, always thinking everyone wants what he wants. He's gone, Victoria said quietly. Resigned last week. Most of the board, too. We're drowning, Sarah. I stood and walked to the window. Below, workers were installing Avalon's new logo on the building's facade. Clean, modern, nothing like Barrett's old-fashioned corporate branding. Do you remember what you said to me 3 years ago, Victoria? When I raised concerns about gender bias in partnership promotions? She shifted uncomfortably. Sarah, that was. You said, sometimes we have to accept that change takes time. Well, time's up. Change isn't something you wait for anymore. It's something you make happen. Please, she whispered. Hundreds of jobs are at stake. I turned back to face her. Those people are welcome to apply at Avalon. We're always looking for talent who value merit over politics. But Barrett and Associates? It's finished. And we both know it. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with breaking news. Barrett and Associates stock had been suspended from trading. The end was near. Victoria stood, shoulders slumped. What should I tell the board? Tell them thank you, I said. If they hadn't tried to push me out, I might never have built something better. After she left, Maya came in with the afternoon briefing. 4 more major clients finalizing their transfer paperwork. Western Group wants to expand their contract. Oh, and that article in Forbes just went live. I pulled up the article on my tablet. The Revolution in Consulting. How Sarah Barrett Reshaped an Industry. The subtitle made me smile. Sometimes the greatest success stories start with rejection. My phone buzzed again. A message from Margaret Chin. Saw the Forbes piece. You started something bigger than you know. Half my CEO network is reviewing their consulting contracts, asking questions about diversity and leadership. You scared them all. Good, I thought. They should be scared. Later that evening, as I was preparing to leave, Maya brought in one final document. You'll want to see this. It was an email from Michael Thompson, forwarded by one of our former colleagues. In it, he tried to explain to Barrett's remaining board members how he'd mishandled the situation with me, how he'd underestimated the importance of client relationships, how he'd failed to recognize the changing nature of the industry. Too little, too late, Maya commented. No, I said, reading through his desperate attempts at self-justification. It's exactly on time. This is what accountability looks like. The next morning, I called an all-hands meeting. Our new office space, 3 floors of the city's most prestigious business address, was packed with employees, many of them former Barrett staff who'd chosen to follow me. 1 month ago, we set out to build something different. Not just a consulting firm, but a new way of doing business. Where talent matters more than tenure. Where relationships mean more than rankings. Where innovation isn't just a buzzword, but a way of life. I paused, looking out at the faces before me. Young analysts who'd never have gotten a chance at Barrett. Experienced consultants who'd been passed over for promotion because they didn't fit the traditional mold. All of them here because they believed in something better. Yesterday, Barrett and Associates announced their filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Some will call this a tragedy. Others will call it justice. I call it evolution. The old way of doing business, where power was hoarded by a select few, where success depended more on who you knew than what you could do. That way is dying. and we're building what comes next." The room erupted in applause. I raised my hand for silence. But this isn't about revenge. It's about revolution. About showing the world that success doesn't have to come at the expense of ethics. That power doesn't have to corrupt. That the future belongs to those who build it, not those who inherit it. My phone buzzed. Another client signing on. Another victory in the quiet revolution we'd started. So yes, celebrate today. But tomorrow, we get back to work. Because we're not just running a company, we're changing an industry, and we're just getting started. That evening, as the city lights began to twinkle on, I stood in my office one last time, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. About the board meeting that had meant to end my career, but had instead launched something new. About the lessons learned and the battles won. My phone buzzed with a final message for the day, a news alert. Barrett and Associates to cease operations after 45 years. Below it, a quote from an industry analyst. "This marks the end of an era in consulting and the beginning of something new." I smiled, turned off my office lights, and headed home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that success doesn't always look like what people expect. Sometimes it looks like a woman walking out of a board meeting with nothing but her dignity and a client list. Sometimes it looks like revolution. Sometimes it looks like me. "Mrs. Chen, your foundation's quarterly report needs your signature before Monday's board meeting." I looked up from the stack of grant applications covering my office desk, accepting the leather portfolio from my assistant David. The Chen Foundation had processed over 200 funding requests this month alone. Everything from pediatric cancer research to arts education programs. Each application represented someone's hope for positive change, and I took that responsibility seriously. "Thank you, David. Any urgent items that can't wait until after the weekend?" He consulted his tablet, scrolling through the carefully organized schedule that kept my philanthropic work running smoothly. The Children's Hospital called about the new wing groundbreaking ceremony. "They want to confirm your availability for the dedication speech next month." I signed the quarterly report, noting the foundation's assets had grown another 12% this quarter. Conservative investments and strategic partnerships had built our endowment from my initial $20 million commitment into something approaching $200 million over the past 8 years. Not bad for someone who'd started with a business degree and determination to make generational wealth mean something beyond luxury purchases. Confirm the dedication. What else? Your mother-in-law called twice about tonight's gala seating arrangements. Something about ensuring proper family representation at the head table. I suppressed a smile. Eleanor Whitman had been micromanaging family appearances since I'd married her son 5 years ago, treating every social event like a strategic military operation. Tonight's Children's Medical Foundation Gala would be no exception, especially since the Whitman family had been prominent supporters for decades. Did she mention anything specific about the arrangements? David's diplomatically neutral expression told me everything. She expressed concern about maintaining appropriate family hierarchy during the speeches. Translation: Eleanor didn't want me sitting too close to the donors who actually mattered. Despite my foundation's significant contributions to various causes, she still saw me as the outsider who'd somehow captured her son's attention without bringing sufficient social pedigree to the marriage. "I'll handle it tonight. Anything else requiring immediate attention?" The Detroit project site visit is confirmed for Tuesday, and the Education Initiative presentations are ready for your review. I nodded, gathering the grant applications I'd been reviewing. The Chen Foundation's Education Initiative was my personal passion project, providing scholarships and program funding to underserved communities. This year's budget allocated $40 million specifically for educational equity programs, money that would change hundreds of lives. My phone buzzed with a text from my husband, James. Mom's already at the venue directing setup. Fair warning, she's in full general mode tonight. I replied, understood. See you at 7. James had learned to navigate his mother's social control tendencies by providing advance warnings and strategic absences. He genuinely loved both of us, but had long ago stopped trying to broker peace between Eleanor's traditional expectations and my decidedly non-traditional approach to wealth and influence. The drive to the Meridian Hotel took 30 minutes through downtown traffic, giving me time to review my mental notes about tonight's event. The Children's Medical Foundation raised money for pediatric research and treatment programs, a cause close to my heart since my younger brother's successful leukemia treatment 15 years ago. The foundation's annual gala typically brought in around $3 million, funding that supported groundbreaking research initiatives. I'd been quietly supporting their work for years through both personal donations and foundation grants, but always in ways that didn't draw attention to the amounts involved. Eleanor Whitman thrived on public recognition and carefully orchestrated social positioning. I preferred results over recognition, a philosophical difference that had created tension from the beginning of my relationship with James. The hotel's valet service handled my car efficiently, and I entered the ballroom to find the expected scene of controlled elegance. Crystal chandeliers, perfectly arranged floral centerpieces, round tables seating 10, with a raised platform for the evening's speakers and award presentations. The guest list included the city's most prominent philanthropists, medical professionals, and society figures, all dressed in variations of expensive formal wear. Eleanor stood near the registration table, wearing an elegant navy gown and what I'd learned to recognize as her event management expression. She was discussing something with the foundation's executive director, gesturing toward the seating chart with practiced authority. "Isabella, darling," she called when she spotted me. The term darling from Eleanor always carried subtle condescension, as if she were addressing a child who needed gentle correction. "I was just ensuring your seating placement respects the foundation's donor hierarchy." I approached with a warm smile, having learned that genuine pleasantness confused Eleanor more than defensive responses. "Good evening, Eleanor. The decorations look beautiful. I'm sure tonight will be very successful." "Yes. Well, success requires proper planning and appropriate recognition of long-standing supporters." She consulted her seating chart, making small marks with a gold pen. "I've placed you at table 12 with some lovely young couples. I thought you'd be more comfortable with people closer to your own social level." Table 12 was near the back of the room, strategically positioned to be barely visible from the main platform. Eleanor had effectively relegated me to the children's table, despite my foundation's substantial ongoing support for the organization. "That sounds perfect," I said calmly. "I'm sure I'll enjoy the conversation." James appeared beside me, handsome in his black tuxedo and clearly prepared to run interference if necessary. "Mom, Isabella, you both look wonderful. How are the final preparations going?" "Smoothly, thanks to proper advance planning," Eleanor replied, shooting me a meaningful look. Though some people seem to think charitable work is just about writing checks, rather than understanding the social dynamics involved. The bar was subtle but clear. Eleanor believed I lacked sophistication in my approach to philanthropy, preferring direct action over the elaborate social rituals that sustained her peer group's charitable efforts. "Speaking of checks," James said carefully, "Isabella's foundation has been incredibly generous to pediatric research programs. I saw the quarterly reports, and the funding amounts are really impressive." Eleanor's smile, tightened almost imperceptibly. She knew about my foundation, but had never inquired about specifics, preferring to assume it was a small-scale vanity project rather than acknowledge its actual scope and impact. Of course, dear. New money often tries to make up for lack of heritage through excessive generosity. The comment landed like a slap, though delivered with Eleanor's trademark gracious tone. She just dismissed my family's hard-earned success as new money, while simultaneously criticizing the generosity that had helped fund medical breakthroughs saving children's lives. James tensed beside me, but I maintained my calm expression. You're absolutely right, Eleanor. Heritage is important, though I find that combining traditional values with contemporary resources often produces the most meaningful results. Before she could respond, the Foundation's executive director approached our group with obvious relief at finding Eleanor available for consultation. Mrs. Whitman, we need your guidance on the auction presentation order. Should we lead with the research equipment or the scholarship fund? Eleanor immediately turned her attention to event logistics, leaving James and me to find our assigned seats. As we walked through the ballroom, I noticed the careful social geography Eleanor had orchestrated. The head table featured longtime board members and major donors whose families had been supporting the foundation for generations. Tables 2 through 6 held prominent physicians, pharmaceutical executives, and established society figures. My table 12 was populated by younger professionals who probably donated in the hundreds rather than thousands. I'm sorry about Mom, James said quietly as we reached our table. She's been stressed about tonight's fundraising goals. It's fine. I understand the pressure of event management. What I understood was that Eleanor saw me as a threat to her carefully maintained social hierarchy. My foundation's resources exceeded those of most families at the head table, but I'd never demanded recognition or board positions in return for support. That restraint had apparently been interpreted as evidence that my contributions weren't significant enough to warrant serious consideration. Our tablemates were indeed pleasant young professionals. 2 couples who worked in medical administration, a pediatric nurse and her husband, and a pharmaceutical researcher with his wife. The conversation flowed easily through topics ranging from treatment innovations to fundraising challenges, with everyone sharing genuine passion for improving children's health care. During the salad course, I noticed Eleanor moving between tables, greeting longtime supporters with warm familiarity while maintaining polite distance from those she considered less established. Her performance was flawless, demonstrating the social skills that had made her a formidable force in philanthropic circles for 30 years. The auction began after dinner, featuring experiences and items donated by local businesses and wealthy supporters. Art pieces, vacation packages, dining experiences, and medical equipment all commanded impressive bids from the assembled guests. Eleanor served as one of the volunteer auctioneers, her practiced charm encouraging competitive bidding that pushed prices well above estimated values. As the auction concluded and the evening speakers approached the podium, Eleanor made her way to my table. She consumed at least 3 glasses of wine during dinner, and her usual careful control had relaxed into something approaching honesty. "Isabella, could I speak with you privately?" she asked, though her tone suggested it wasn't really a request. I followed her to a quiet alcove near the hotel bar, away from the main ballroom activity. The space was dimly lit and relatively secluded, perfect for the kind of direct conversation Eleanor had been avoiding for 5 years. "I think it's time we discussed your role in this family," she began, her voice low but intense. "James is a wonderful man from a respected family with deep roots in this community. His future requires careful consideration of social positioning and appropriate partnerships." I remained silent, allowing her to continue. You seem like a nice enough person, but you'll never fit into this family or our social circle. Your background, your approach to charity, your complete lack of understanding about how these relationships actually work. She gestured toward the ballroom. Tonight is a perfect example. You sit quietly at the back, contributing nothing to the conversation, while people who've built real influence over decades handle the important work. The words hung in the air between us, years of carefully suppressed disapproval finally spoken aloud. I appreciate your honesty, Eleanor, I said calmly. If you'll excuse me for a moment, I need to make a phone call. I walked to the hotel lobby, pulling out my phone to call David. He answered immediately, despite the late hour. Mrs. Chen, how can I help? I need you to process an immediate donation to the Children's Medical Foundation. $5 million from the foundation's discretionary fund. Have the paperwork ready for electronic signature within the next 10 minutes. Certainly, any specific designation for the funding, general operating support. And David, please call the foundation's executive director directly to confirm the donation tonight. I believe they're hoping to announce a funding milestone during the evening's program. Understood. Anything else? That should be sufficient. I returned to the ballroom as the foundation's executive director was approaching the microphone for his closing remarks. Eleanor had resumed her position at the head table, looking satisfied with whatever she believed she'd accomplished during our conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, the executive director began. Tonight has been an extraordinary success, with auction proceeds exceeding our projected goals by nearly 40%. Polite applause filled the room. But before we conclude, I've just received notification of an additional contribution that brings tonight's total to unprecedented levels. He paused, consulting the note David had apparently delivered. I'm honored to announce a $5 million donation from the Chen Foundation, designated for our general operating support. The applause was no longer polite. It was thunderous, sustained, and accompanied by surprised murmurs as people processed the significance of the announcement. $5 million was more than many of the Foundation's previous annual totals. I remained seated at table 12, maintaining the same calm expression I'd worn all evening. But around me, the social dynamics Eleanor had carefully orchestrated were crumbling in real time. The Foundation's board president approached the microphone next, clearly struggling to manage his excitement. The Chen Foundation's extraordinary generosity represents a transformational moment for our organization. Mrs. Chen, would you please join us on stage to accept our deepest gratitude? Every head in the ballroom turned toward my table. The pediatric nurse beside me gasped softly. The pharmaceutical researcher was staring with obvious shock. From the head table, I could see Eleanor's face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror as she realized the implications. I stood slowly, smoothing my dress, and walked through the suddenly silent ballroom toward the stage. The same walk Eleanor had dismissed as insignificant now carried very different weight as 300 prominent citizens processed the revelation that the quiet woman relegated to the back table had just made the largest single donation in the Foundation's history. On stage, the executive director shook my hand warmly while the board president presented me with a crystal award that clearly hadn't been prepared in advance. The applause continued as photographers captured the moment for the Foundation's promotional materials. Mrs. Chen, the executive director said into the microphone, would you like to say a few words about the Chen Foundation's commitment to pediatric healthcare? I accepted the microphone, looking out over the crowd that was now paying very close attention to every word. Thank you for this recognition, Though I want to emphasize that tonight's donation represents the collective work of our foundation's entire team. The Chen Foundation was established to address critical gaps in healthcare access and research funding, particularly for underserved populations. I paused, noticing Eleanor's increasingly pale complexion. Over the past 8 years, we've allocated over $40 million specifically to pediatric research and treatment programs. Tonight's contribution continues that commitment, funding innovative research that will save children's lives for generations to come. The numbers were having their intended effect. $40 million plus tonight's $5 million represented more philanthropic impact than most of the families in attendance had achieved over decades of carefully managed social giving. The Foundation's education initiative has also provided scholarships to over 300 medical students from underrepresented communities, ensuring that the next generation of physicians reflects the diversity of patients they'll serve. I handed the microphone back to the executive director, accepted final congratulations from the board members, and returned to my table through sustained applause. The walk back revealed a completely transformed social landscape. People who'd ignored me all evening now watched with newfound respect. Conversations paused as I passed, with obvious recalculation of social hierarchies occurring in real time. James met me halfway, his expression showing pride, mixed with amazement. He'd known about my foundation's work, but hadn't fully understood the scale of impact until tonight's public revelation. Isabella, that was incredible. I had no idea about the $40 million in previous funding. Your mother and I had a conversation about family contributions. I thought it might be helpful to clarify the Chen Foundation's level of engagement. As we reached our table, Eleanor appeared beside us, her earlier confidence replaced by barely controlled distress. The carefully orchestrated social evening had become a public demonstration of her complete misunderstanding of family dynamics. Isabella, she said quietly, I think we need to continue our conversation. Of course. Though perhaps James should join us this time. We found a quiet corner where Eleanor could speak without being overheard by the guests who were now eyeing our family group with obvious curiosity. I owe you an apology, Eleanor began, her voice strained. I clearly misunderstood the scope of your charitable work. You misunderstood several things, Eleanor, but the charitable work was probably the least important. James looked between us, sensing undercurrents he hadn't witnessed directly. What exactly did you misunderstand, Mom? Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. I suggested that Isabella didn't fit into our family or social circle, that her contributions weren't significant enough to warrant serious consideration. You said, I'd never be good enough for this family. I corrected gently. Those were your exact words. James's expression shifted from confusion to anger as he processed the implications. Mom, what were you thinking? I was thinking about family heritage and social positioning. I didn't realize that Isabella's foundation had achieved such substantial impact. This isn't about money, Eleanor, I said quietly. This is about respect, about treating family members with basic courtesy, regardless of their perceived social status. You're absolutely right. I've been unfair. The admission clearly cost her significant effort, but the evening's revelations had shattered her confidence in her own judgment. Over the following weeks, Eleanor's attitude underwent a dramatic transformation. She began asking informed questions about the Chen Foundation's work, attending board meetings as an observer, and introducing me to her social circle as my daughter-in-law who runs one of the city's most impactful philanthropic organizations. The shift was comprehensive and permanent. Within 3 months, she'd recommended me for positions on 2 hospital boards and a university foundation committee. Her friends, who'd previously treated me with polite dismissiveness, now sought my advice on their own charitable initiatives. But the most significant change was personal. Eleanor began treating me as an intellectual equal rather than a social project requiring correction. Our conversations moved from superficial pleasantries to substantive discussions about healthcare policy, education reform, and strategic philanthropy. 6 months after the gala, Eleanor and I were reviewing grant applications together in my foundation office, collaborating on a new initiative to fund medical research at the Children's Hospital. "I had been thinking about that night," she said, setting down a scholarship application, "about how wrong I was about everything." "You weren't wrong about everything, just about some important assumptions. I assumed that generosity required recognition, that impact required social positioning, that family status could be measured by how closely someone conformed to established patterns. I looked up from the research proposal I'd been reviewing, and now I realize that real influence comes from actual results, not social performance. That my daughter-in-law has accomplished more meaningful change in 8 years than I managed in 30. We've accomplished different things, Eleanor. Your social connections have opened doors that made our collaboration possible. Perhaps. But I spent decades focused on maintaining position while you built something that actually improves lives." The relationship between Eleanor and me had evolved into genuine partnership, built on mutual respect rather than social obligation. James often commented that family dinners had become more interesting once his mother and wife started sharing ideas instead of navigating carefully around unspoken tensions. A year after the charity gala, Eleanor approached me with a proposal that would have seemed impossible during our first difficult conversation. "I'd like to establish a legacy fund," she said over coffee in my office. "Something that combines the Whitman family's long-term community connections with the Chen Foundation's strategic approach to philanthropy." "What kind of focus did you have in mind?" "Healthcare access for underserved populations. I've been learning about treatment disparities, and I think our combined resources could address some critical gaps." We spent the next 3 months developing the Whitman Chin Health Equity Initiative, a $10 million fund that would provide both direct patient support and systemic healthcare improvements. Eleanor's social network provided political connections and community access, while my foundation's infrastructure handled program management and impact measurement. The initiative's launch event drew over 500 attendees, including elected officials, medical leaders, and philanthropic organizations from across the region. Eleanor's introductory speech highlighted the importance of combining traditional community engagement with innovative funding strategies. When she introduced me as her partner in developing the initiative, the applause was genuine rather than obligatory. The woman who'd once dismissed me as socially inadequate now presented me as an essential collaborator in addressing community challenges. "Mrs. Chen brings both strategic vision and operational excellence to this initiative," Eleanor told the audience. Her foundation's track record demonstrates that philanthropic resources can create lasting change when managed with proper accountability and community focus. Later that evening, as we watched guests mingle and discuss potential collaborations, Eleanor reflected on the transformation our relationship had undergone. "You know, I spent so many years protecting what I thought was important that I nearly missed recognizing what actually mattered." Which was, that family isn't about maintaining traditions or social positions. It's about supporting each other's efforts to contribute something meaningful to the world. I smiled, thinking about the journey we traveled from that first hostile conversation to our current partnership. Sometimes the best outcomes come from the most unexpected beginnings. Indeed, though I still think you should have told me sooner about the foundation's scope. We could have been collaborating years earlier. I tried several times, but you weren't ready to hear it then. And now you ask questions instead of making assumptions. That makes all the difference. The Whitman-Chin Health Equity Initiative has since expanded into a $50 million program that serves as a model for other communities. Eleanor and I co-chair the board, combining her decades of nonprofit governance experience with my strategic philanthropy background. But more importantly, we've built a relationship based on genuine respect and shared commitment to creating positive change. The mother-in-law, who once told me I'd never fit into her family, now introduces me as her most valued collaborator in making that family's legacy more meaningful than either of us could have achieved alone. Success isn't just about having resources. It's about using those resources in ways that create lasting positive impact and building relationships strong enough to multiply that impact over time. Sometimes that means making dramatic gestures at charity galas. More often, it means patiently demonstrating your values until others are ready to recognize and respect them. The quarterly portfolio review spread across my mahogany desk showed exactly what I'd expected: another record-breaking performance that would make my competitors weep into their morning coffee. My investment firm, Meridian Capital Management, had just closed the best quarter in our 12-year history, with assets under management reaching $2.8 billion and returns averaging 14.7% across all client portfolios. Not bad for a company that started in a converted garage with $50,000 in seed money and a business plan scribbled on legal pads. I'm Rebecca Chin, 42 years old, and I spent the last 15 years building what Forbes recently called one of the most innovative wealth management firms on the West Coast. My specialty is identifying undervalued opportunities in emerging markets and tech startups, investments that traditional firms dismiss as too risky, but that consistently generate exceptional returns for clients willing to trust my judgment. My assistant knocked on the door, interrupting my review of the Asian semiconductor positions that had gained 34% this quarter. "Rebecca, your cousin David called about the family reunion logistics. He needs to confirm your attendance for the catering count." I glanced at my calendar. The annual Chin family reunion was next weekend at Aunt Margaret's estate in Marin County. 3 days of forced socialization with relatives who alternated between treating me like an outsider and asking for investment advice, depending on their current financial needs. "Tell him I'll be there," I said, already dreading the inevitable conversations about why I wasn't married, why I worked so much, and why I never brought a nice boyfriend to family events. The Chin family reunions had been a tradition for 23 years, ever since my grandfather's death left Aunt Margaret as the unofficial family matriarch. She inherited his Victorian mansion overlooking San Francisco Bay, along with his role as keeper of family traditions and distributor of family wisdom. Every summer, 3 generations of Chins gathered for a weekend of barbecues, group photos, and carefully orchestrated activities designed to maintain family bonds. I'd attended every reunion since I was 19, though my participation had evolved from enthusiastic young cousin to polite but distant family member. The transformation happened gradually as my career success created an uncomfortable dynamic with relatives who viewed wealth with suspicion and ambition with disapproval. My grandfather would have understood my drive. He'd immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but determination and built a small electronics importing business that supported 3 generations of family members. But he died when I was 18, before he could see me establish my own version of the American dream. The drive to Marin County took 90 minutes through weekend traffic, giving me time to mentally prepare for 3 days of family politics. Aunt Margaret's estate sprawled across 5 acres of manicured gardens and rolling lawns, with the main house commanding spectacular views of the bay. The property was worth approximately $4.2 million, a fortune that had allowed Margaret to maintain her position as family benefactor and social coordinator. Cars filled the circular driveway when I arrived. David's Honda Civic, Cousin Lisa's minivan loaded with car seats and soccer equipment, Uncle Peter's pickup truck from his contracting business. I parked my Tesla Model S at the edge of the circle, already anticipating the comments about fancy electric cars and showing off. The front door opened before I could knock. Margaret stood there in her usual reunion outfit, white linen pants, and a flowing blue blouse that she believed made her look bohemian and artistic. At 68, she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never had to worry about money or wonder where her next meal was coming from. "Rebecca, you made it. I was beginning to worry you decided work was more important than family again." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, handing her the bottle of wine I'd brought, a 2018 Opus one that cost more than most people spent on groceries in a month. "How thoughtful. Though you know we usually just drink the house wine at these gatherings." The house wine was a $12 Trader Joe's blend that Margaret bought by the case, but I'd learned years ago that bringing expensive gifts only highlighted the economic gulf between my lifestyle and the family's more modest circumstances. The main living room buzzed with conversation as relatives caught up on the year's events. Uncle Peter dominated one corner, explaining to David's teenage son why college was overrated when skilled trades offered better job security. Cousin Lisa chased her twin 8-year-olds while trying to participate in Aunt Ruth's monologue about her upcoming retirement from teaching. I moved through the room, exchanging hugs and updating relatives on my life in carefully edited summaries that downplayed my professional success and emphasized my connection to family values. Yes, business was going well. No, I hadn't met anyone special. Yes, I was still working too much. No, I didn't have any exciting vacation plans. "Rebecca." David's wife Jennifer waved me over to the kitchen island where she was arranging appetizers. "We were just talking about college funds for the kids. Lisa was saying how impossible it is to save enough for tuition these days." "It's terrifying," Lisa agreed, shifting her youngest daughter to her other hip. "State school tuition alone is $15,000 a year now. By the time Emma's ready for college, it'll probably be $25,000. I don't know how middle-class families are supposed to afford it." "Maybe she won't need college," Uncle Peter called from across the room. "Plenty of good jobs don't require a degree. My apprentice electricians make $60,000 their first year." "That's not the point, Dad," David replied. "We want the kids to have options." "Options are expensive," Margaret observed, joining our conversation. "That's why family support is so important. When my generation was starting families, we could count on help from parents and grandparents. Now everyone's so focused on individual success that family obligations get forgotten." I recognized the subtle criticism embedded in her comment. Margaret had strong opinions about family loyalty and frequently expressed concern that younger generations were too selfish and career-focused to maintain traditional family bonds. "Some of us do what we can," I said carefully. "Of course, dear. But it's not the same as the old days when families really took care of each other." The conversation continued around me as I nodded and made appropriate responses. But my mind was elsewhere, thinking about the family trust account that I'd established 10 years ago through my investment firm. The Chen Family Education Fund contained $1.2 million in carefully managed investments, generating approximately $84,000 annually in returns that could be distributed for college tuition, educational expenses, or family emergencies. None of them knew about the trust because I'd structured it to appear as if the funding came from an anonymous donor with connections to my grandfather's old business associates. Margaret administered the distributions, believing that a wealthy stranger had chosen to honor my grandfather's memory by supporting his descendants' education. Over the past decade, the trust had paid for David's MBA program, Lisa's nursing degree, and partial tuition for 3 of the younger cousins. Margaret regularly praised the mysterious benefactor's generosity while lamenting that her own family members weren't financially successful enough to provide similar support. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was simultaneously criticized for being too focused on money and praised for the financial support I provided, support that none of them realized came from me. Dinner was served on the back terrace, with views of the bay sparkling in the evening light. Margaret had hired the same caterer she used every year, a local company that specialized in upscale comfort food, herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, artisanal bread, and chocolate mousse for dessert. The cost for feeding 35 people was approximately $2,400, which I knew because I'd been discreetly reimbursing Margaret for reunion expenses for the past 5 years. "Before we eat," Margaret announced, standing at the head of the table with a wine glass in hand, "I want to share some wonderful news about our family education fund." The table quieted as everyone turned their attention to her. Margaret loved being the center of attention, especially when she could share good news or take credit for positive developments. As you all know, we've been blessed to have an anonymous benefactor supporting our family's educational goals for the past 10 years. This year, I'm excited to announce that the fund has grown enough to provide full tuition assistance for Tommy's engineering program and partial support for Rachel's graduate school applications. Applause erupted around the table. David's 17-year-old son, Tommy, beamed with pride, while Lisa's 15-year-old daughter, Rachel, looked stunned by her good fortune. "But that's not all," Margaret continued, clearly enjoying her role as bearer of good news. "Our benefactor has also approved emergency funding to help Peter with his medical expenses from last year's surgery." Uncle Peter looked genuinely moved. He'd been struggling with bills from his hernia operation, and his contractor's insurance hadn't covered all the costs. "I don't know how to thank this person," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Whoever they are, they've been a blessing to our family." "Indeed they have," Margaret agreed. "Which brings me to an important point about family loyalty and support." Her tone shifted, becoming more serious. I felt a familiar tension building in my chest, the same feeling I got when Margaret launched into one of her lectures about family values and generational responsibility. We're fortunate to have someone outside our family who cares enough to support us. But it makes me wonder why we can't provide that same level of support for each other from within our own family. She paused, her eyes scanning the table before landing on me. Some family members have been blessed with financial success, but haven't shared those blessings with the people who raised them, who supported them, who made their success possible. The table went silent except for the distant sound of waves against the shoreline below. Everyone understood that Margaret was talking about me, though she was too polite to say so directly. "I think it's important for all of us to remember that family comes first," she continued. "Before business, before personal ambition, before anything else. That's what makes us strong as a unit." David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Lisa studied her wine glass with intense concentration. Uncle Peter cleared his throat, but didn't speak. They all knew this speech was directed at me, and they were all waiting to see how I would respond. "I agree that family is important, I said carefully. We all support each other in different ways. Do we? Margaret's voice carried a sharp edge now. Because I look around this table, and I see people who struggled with college tuition, medical bills, and home repairs, while other family members accumulate wealth without sharing it. Margaret, David started, but she waved him off. No, this needs to be said. We have someone in our family who could easily afford to help with Tommy's tuition or Peter's medical bills or any of the other expenses that have caused stress and worry for people at this table. She was looking directly at me now, no longer pretending to address the group generally. But instead of family support, we've had to rely on the kindness of strangers. That says something about our values and our priorities. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, but I kept my voice level. I've never been asked to help with any of those expenses. You shouldn't have to be asked. Aunt Ruth chimed in from across the table. Family members should offer help when they see others struggling, especially when they have more money than they could spend in a lifetime. Lisa added quietly. The attack was coordinated, I realized. They'd planned this confrontation, probably discussed it in advance, and decided that the reunion dinner would be the perfect venue for publicly shaming me into financial compliance. I think there's been a misunderstanding about my financial situation, I said. Has there? Margaret leaned forward. Because according to that Forbes article David showed me, your investment firm manages almost $3 billion. Even if you only keep a small percentage of that, you're incredibly wealthy. Managing other people's money isn't the same as owning it. But you do own a significant portion, don't you? You're the founder and majority shareholder. I couldn't deny it without lying outright. My personal net worth was approximately $47 million, built through equity in my firm, investment returns, and careful financial planning over 15 years. The point is, Margaret continued, we shouldn't need anonymous benefactors when we have family members who could help. It's embarrassing, frankly. Embarrassing to who? To all of us. It makes us look like a family that doesn't take care of its own. I looked around the table at faces that ranged from sympathetic to accusatory. David looked embarrassed by the confrontation but didn't defend me. Lisa was nodding along with Margaret's points. Uncle Peter was studiously avoiding eye contact. I'm sorry you find the situation embarrassing, I said finally. That's not an apology. It's deflection, Margaret snapped. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Do I? Yes. You've chosen individual success over family responsibility. You've built wealth while watching your relatives struggle. And now you sit at our dinner table acting like you don't understand why that's problematic. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was spreading beyond anyone's control. Around the table, relatives shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to pile on or try to diffuse the tension. You know what the real problem is, Margaret continued, her voice rising. You're not really one of us anymore. You've changed so much that you don't even think like family. You think like a stranger. Maybe because I'm treated like one. Oh, please. You're treated exactly like family. You're invited to everything, included in all our traditions, welcomed in this house every year. Welcomed so you can lecture me about my financial obligations. Welcomed so you can remember where you came from and who supported you when you were nobody. The words hit like a physical blow. When you were nobody. Margaret had finally said what she'd been thinking for years. That my success was an aberration. That I'd somehow forgotten my proper place in the family hierarchy. I see, I said quietly. Do you? Because I don't think you understand how fortunate you've been to have this family, to have these connections, to have people who believed in you before you proved yourself. What exactly did this family do to support my career? We gave you roots, values, a foundation. We taught you the importance of hard work and education. And what have I given back? What have you given back? Margaret laughed bitterly. You show up once a year, bring expensive wine that makes everyone else feel cheap, and act like you're doing us a favor by gracing us with your presence. That's not fair, David said quietly, finally finding his voice. Isn't it? Margaret turned to him. When was the last time Rebecca offered to help with anything? When has she ever contributed to family expenses, or supported anyone's education, or helped with medical bills? She doesn't have to, David started. Of course she doesn't have to. No one has to do anything, but family members want to help each other. They offer assistance without being asked. They share their good fortune. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin beside my plate. You're absolutely right, Margaret, I said, keeping my voice calm despite the fury building in my chest. I haven't been acting like family. I've been acting like a stranger. Finally, some acknowledgement. You're not one of us, she continued, pointing at me with her wine glass. You never really belonged here. You've made that clear through your choices and your priorities. The entire table nodded in agreement. Lisa murmured, exactly. Uncle Peter grunted approval. David looked uncomfortable, but didn't disagree. They were all aligned against me, all convinced that I'd somehow betrayed family values by building a successful career without constantly subsidizing their expenses. I understand, I said simply. Good. Maybe now we can move forward with realistic expectations about what this family means to each other. I excused myself from the table and walked into the house, ostensibly to use the bathroom, but actually to make a phone call. In Margaret's guest powder room, I dialed my office number and accessed the secure voicemail system I used for urgent client matters. This is Rebecca Chin, authorization code 847,392. I need to schedule an emergency trust dissolution for Monday morning. Chen Family Education Fund. Account number 4,471,293. Complete liquidation and fund transfer to my personal accounts. All automatic distributions should be canceled effective immediately. I hung up and returned to the terrace, where dessert was being served and conversation had moved on to safer topics like vacation plans and local politics. No one mentioned my brief absence or asked if I was feeling well. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced normalcy. I participated in conversations about the weather and Margaret's garden renovations. I admired photos of grandchildren and listened to updates about neighborhood developments. I played my role as the successful but disconnected family member who everyone tolerated but no longer truly welcomed. At 11 o'clock, I announced that I was tired and would be heading back to the city, rather than staying overnight as originally planned. So soon? Margaret asked with theatrical disappointment. We were hoping you'd join us for the group photo tomorrow morning. I have an early meeting. Of course you do. Work before family, as always. I didn't respond to the barb. I simply collected my purse, said goodnight to everyone, and walked to my car under a sky full of stars that reflected off the dark bay waters. As I drove back through the empty highway toward San Francisco, I thought about the trust fund that would be dissolved Monday morning. 10 years of anonymous support, $1.2 million in principal plus accumulated returns, distributed to family members who had just declared that I wasn't really one of them. The irony was perfect. They wanted me to act like family, while simultaneously announcing that I didn't belong. They demanded financial support while rejecting my membership in the group that supposedly deserved that support. Monday morning arrived with typical San Francisco fog rolling across the bay and settling over the financial district like a gray blanket. I was in my office by 7, reviewing the trust dissolution paperwork that my legal team had prepared over the weekend. The Chen Family Education Fund would be completely liquidated by close of business, with all assets transferred to my personal investment accounts. The anonymous benefactor who had supported family education for a decade would simply disappear, leaving no forwarding address or explanation. My phone rang at 9:15. Margaret's number appeared on the caller ID. "Rebecca, I hope you had a safe drive home Saturday night." "I did, thank you. I wanted to call because I've been thinking about our conversation at dinner. I may have been too harsh in my comments." "May have been." "Well, I was frustrated, but family is family, and we shouldn't let money issues divide us." "I agree completely." "Good. I'm glad you understand. Actually, I'm calling because we have some wonderful news about the education fund." I waited, saying nothing. "Our benefactor has approved a special distribution to help with the reunion expenses and some other family needs. Isn't that wonderful?" "What kind of special distribution?" $50,000, enough to cover this year's reunion costs and help several family members with some unexpected expenses. I almost laughed. Margaret was calling to tell me about money I had provided, money that had just been canceled, money that no longer existed. "That is wonderful news," I said. "I thought you'd be pleased. It shows that some people still understand family obligations, even if they're not technically family themselves." The casual cruelty of the comment was breathtaking. Margaret was praising my generosity while simultaneously excluding me from the family that supposedly benefited from it. "Margaret, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What if this anonymous benefactor decided to stop providing support? What would the family do then?" "Stop providing support? Why would they do that? They've been so generous for so many years. But hypothetically, what if they felt like their contributions weren't appreciated or that the family didn't deserve continued assistance?" "That's a strange question, Rebecca. Why would you even think about that?" "Just curious about contingency planning." "Well, I suppose we'd have to find other sources of support. Maybe family members who have been blessed with success would finally step up and take responsibility." "Maybe they would. Speaking of which, I was hoping you'd reconsider your position about helping with family expenses. Not that we need it with our benefactor's support, but it would mean a lot symbolically." "I'll definitely reconsider my position." "Wonderful. I knew you'd come around once you had time to think about it properly." We ended the call with Margaret's cheerful assumption that I would soon be writing checks to supplement the anonymous fund she had no idea I controlled. At 10:30, my assistant knocked on my door. "Rebecca, you have a call from Margaret Chen. She sounds upset." I picked up the phone to find Margaret's voice strained and confused. "Rebecca, something terrible has happened with the education fund." "What kind of terrible?" "I just got a call from the bank. They're saying the account has been closed, that all the money has been withdrawn." "That's strange. Did they say why?" "They said the account holder requested immediate liquidation and fund transfer. But that's impossible. The benefactor would never do that without talking to me first." "Maybe there was a misunderstanding." "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a disaster. Do you understand what this means? Tommy's tuition payment was supposed to come from that account next week. Peter's medical expenses, Rachel's college fund. Everything was dependent on that money." I could hear the panic building in her voice as she realized the scope of the problem. "Have you tried contacting the benefactor directly?" That's just it. I don't have direct contact information. Everything went through the bank and the trust administration. The benefactor always remained anonymous. That seems like poor planning. Poor planning? Rebecca, this fund has been reliable for 10 years. The benefactor has never missed a distribution, never changed the terms, never even reduced the amount. Why would they suddenly disappear? Maybe they felt like their contributions weren't appreciated. What do you mean? Maybe they heard that the family they were supporting didn't really consider them family. Maybe they decided to direct their charitable giving elsewhere. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Rebecca, do you know something about this? I know that charitable giving is usually based on relationship and mutual respect. When those things disappear, so does the motivation to give. You're talking in riddles. What does any of this have to do with our benefactor? What if your benefactor was someone who attended Saturday's dinner? Someone who heard your speech about family loyalty and financial responsibility? Another pause, longer this time. That's impossible. Our benefactor is a business associate of my father's, someone from his importing business. Are you sure about that? Of course I'm sure. That's what the bank told me when the fund was established. Banks tell people what they're instructed to say by the account holders. Rebecca, what are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. The Chen Family Education Fund was established and funded by someone who wanted to support family education anonymously. For 10 years, that person contributed approximately $120,000 annually to ensure that family members could afford college tuition and medical expenses. Yes, that's correct. And on Saturday night, the family declared that this person wasn't really family and didn't belong at family gatherings. We were talking about you, not the benefactor. Were you? The silence stretched so long I wondered if the call had been disconnected. Rebecca, Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. Are you saying that you? I'm saying that charitable giving requires a relationship between the giver and the recipient. When that relationship is damaged, the giving stops. You're the benefactor. I was the benefactor. For 10 years. For 10 years. But why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted to help family members without creating obligations or changing our relationships. I wanted to support education and help with emergencies because I loved you all, not because I wanted credit or recognition. And now I've been told that I'm not really family and don't belong at family gatherings. So I'm redirecting my charitable giving to people who might appreciate it more. Rebecca, please. This is a misunderstanding. We didn't mean. You meant exactly what you said. I'm not one of you. I never belonged. You made that very clear. But the family needs this money. Tommy's tuition, Peter's bills, Rachel's college fund. The family has decided that I'm not really family. Non-family members don't have obligations to support your expenses. This will devastate everyone. Everyone will have to find other sources of support. Maybe family members who have been blessed with success will finally step up and take responsibility. I was using Margaret's exact words from Saturday night, and we both knew it. What can we do to fix this? You can remember this conversation the next time you decide to lecture someone about family loyalty while simultaneously excluding them from the family. Rebecca, please don't do this. I'm not doing anything. I'm simply practicing what you preached, remembering where I belong and acting accordingly. I hung up without waiting for her response. Over the next week, I received 17 phone calls from various family members. David called to apologize and beg me to reconsider. Lisa called crying about Rachel's college fund. Uncle Peter called to ask if there was any way to restore the medical expense coverage. Even distant cousins I rarely spoke to called to express their shock and request my help. I didn't return any of the calls. The following Saturday, I received an overnight letter from Margaret. Inside was a handwritten note on her personal stationery. Rebecca, I have spent this week thinking about what happened at the reunion and what I said to you. I was wrong. I was wrong about your contributions to this family, wrong about your loyalty, and wrong about your place in our family. You have been the most generous and supportive family member any of us could ask for, and instead of recognizing that, I criticized you for not being generous enough. I don't know how to undo the damage I've caused, but I want you to know that you are absolutely one of us. You have always belonged here, and our family is weaker without your support. I hope you can forgive a foolish old woman who forgot how to appreciate the people she loves most. Please come home to us. Margaret. It was a genuine apology, perhaps the first one Margaret had ever written in her life. But apologies don't erase the impact of public humiliation or restore trust that has been broken. I wrote back, Dear Margaret, thank you for your letter. I accept your apology and hope we can rebuild our relationship over time. However, the Chen Family Education Fund will not be restored. Anonymous charitable giving requires trust and mutual respect, both of which need time to develop. I suggest that family members who have been blessed with success consider stepping up to provide the support that is needed. As you mentioned at dinner, family members should offer help without being asked. I hope someone will follow that advice. Rebecca. 6 months later, David called to update me on family news. Tani was attending community college instead of engineering school because the family couldn't afford university tuition. Peter was still struggling with medical bills. Rachel had taken a part-time job to save for college. Margaret has been putting together family contributions, David said. She's trying to recreate the education fund using donations from family members. How's that working? Not well. Everyone's struggling with their own expenses. We've raised about $8,000 total. That's a start. Rebecca, I know what happened at the reunion was awful, and I know you don't owe us anything. But is there any chance? David, I'm not the same person who quietly funded a family trust for 10 years while being told I don't contribute enough. That person doesn't exist anymore. What do you mean? I mean I've learned that appreciation and respect can't be purchased with anonymous generosity. They have to be earned through authentic relationships. We appreciate you. We all do. You appreciate my money. There's a difference. That's not fair, isn't it? When I was contributing $120,000 annually to family education, I was still being lectured about my lack of family loyalty. When I stopped contributing, suddenly everyone wanted to repair our relationships. What changed wasn't my value as a family member. What changed was my availability as a funding source. David was quiet for a long moment. You're right, he said finally. We took you for granted. Yes, you did. Is there any way to fix that? Time will tell. A year later, I attended Margaret's 70th birthday party. The guest list was smaller than usual. Several family members had moved away for better job opportunities, and the financial stress had taken its toll on family unity. But the people who remained seemed more genuine in their interactions, less focused on maintaining appearances, and more interested in authentic connection. Margaret pulled me aside during the evening. I want to thank you for coming tonight, she said. I wouldn't miss your birthday. I wasn't sure you'd want to be here. After everything that happened. That was a long time ago. Not that long. and the consequences are still affecting everyone. She gestured toward the smaller gathering, the more modest catering, the absence of several family members who had left town seeking better opportunities. Do you regret what you did? I considered the question seriously. I regret that it was necessary, but I don't regret standing up for myself. You taught us something important about taking people for granted. What did I teach you? That generosity without appreciation becomes resentment. That family relationships require mutual respect, and that wealth doesn't create obligations, love does. Those are valuable lessons, expensive lessons. The most important ones usually are. Margaret nodded, looking out at her family gathered on the terrace. Do you think we'll ever get back to where we were? I don't think any of us would want to go back to where we were. We can build something better going forward. Something more honest, something more real. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the past year and the changes it had brought. The family was smaller, but closer. The financial support was gone, but the emotional manipulation had disappeared with it. People who stayed in contact did so because they valued the relationship, not because they hoped for financial assistance. I had redirected my charitable giving to educational scholarships for first-generation college students, young people who understood the value of opportunities and didn't take support for granted. The Chen Family Education Fund had become the Rebecca Chen Foundation, supporting dozens of students annually while requiring no family drama or guilt-inducing lectures. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling behavior that damages relationships. Sometimes family members need to experience the consequences of their choices before they understand the value of what they've lost. And sometimes the person who walks away from the table is the one who finally understands their own worth.